All right, I am now joined by a new character in the GTAA Extended Universe, Jake. Jake, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to watch this with you. My name's Jake Appet. I'm a labor organizer in the New York City area. Excited to start working on helping you produce this show.
Yes. So that is Jake. You will be seeing much more of. So we are, of course, going to watch Charlie Kirk's friend of the show, Charlie Kirk, his debate with Hasan Piker from 2018. And of course, for me, this is a way to both do this weekly debate breakdown live stream, which was on, we did 29 of them on Sundays, but it's now on Thursdays. But also it's a way to do that while also doing some of my own homework because I am debating Charlie next month in Arizona. So a little while back when we did the last regular episode of season 2, we watched some clips from Kirk's debate with Kyle Kalinske. So I've watched that. I don't remember if we actually worked in any clips from it, but I did watch also his debate with Sam Cedar. But this one I will be coming into with fresh eyes. I should also say that that we're going to do in 2 weeks. We're going to do his debate with Vosh. So that's coming up in 2 weeks. No debate breakdown next week. I'm actually going to be flying to New York next week, so I will not be able to do that. But we'll be back in 2 weeks from that, and then like a week after that, I'm going to Arizona. So I should also say, by the way, Jake has, I know, been doing good video work. It's just stuff that you haven't seen since it's for like CWA, not Left Tube. So any other thoughts before we start it up?
No, I have watched some of this, so we're in for a real comradely debate today. Other than that, yeah, I think let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Then we're going to dig deeper into some of those issues. So I'll start with Charlie first. Charlie, tell us from your perspective what you see as some of the biggest issues facing young people today, and then as part of that, why you think young people should be conservatives.
Well, I'd say the biggest issue facing our generation is there's been a bipartisan agreement to continue to spend money we don't have, grow government at the expense of our generation, concentrate power around Washington, D.C., to benefit the wealthy few and the well-connected. And this shouldn't necessarily be a partisan issue, but it does. It becomes. And as we conservatives believe, we believe the bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. As we send more money to Washington, D.C., the IRS gets more powerful, the government bureaucracies get more powerful, and our freedom decreases with that. As we've seen in the last 18 months, what happens when you start to cut taxes and deregulate the economy? The lowest ever Black unemployment rate, the lowest ever Hispanic unemployment rate, the highest ever median income amongst the Hispanic community, economic confidence at an all-time high, 4.2% GDP rate, 3.7% unemployment rate. This economy is so great, Obama's trying to take credit for it. And you can start to see the beginning stages of what happens when you embrace conservative principles and conservative ideas. Juxtapose that with the last 8 years, which was mediocrity and apologizing for being American. And it's great that we have a president that believes in the free market, free enterprise system. And I look forward to this discussion with Hasan, as it's always lively and never disappoints.
All right. So Hasan, you can respond to some of those points if you want to, but also tell us what you see as some of the big issues facing young people today, and from your perspective, why you think young people should be progressive.
I think I'm going to take an apolitical approach as well to this conversation because I like to look at issues and identify what they are and provide what kind of solutions I think are the best possible ones. Currently, the economic system that we're living under is inherently exploitative, it's inherently oppressive, and we're now actually feeling the devastating impact of that more than ever. We live in a country where there are 40 million Americans. We live in the wealthiest nation that has ever existed.
All right, I think the sound is a little low, so we're going to switch something up here for a minute. But while we are setting that up, we'll just say that I notice that Charlie's Trump era debates always start with this thing about the Black and Hispanic unemployment rate. He just loves that.
Yeah, he's going to bring it up a lot more later. And what's funny is that when he's done, to give a preview, but he definitely mentions that when he's talking about the health of the overall economy, he always starts like Hispanic, Black unemployment rate. So it's it comes off a little weird sometimes, like definitely a talking point.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder why. Like, I wonder what's going on there too. Like, is there any reason? I'd have to look at like the numbers from like the years that these debates happen. But is there any reason he doesn't just talk about like the overall unemployment rate? Like why is it always the Black and Hispanic unemployment rate?
Yeah, I don't have the number in front of me, but you'll see. Yeah, we'll see when we get to it. But there's a lot of like in this 3 months or 18 months, like there's a lot of selective time periods, which probably helped the stats a little bit. But he came prepared, so we got to give him credit, I guess, for having some stats to reel off.
Yeah, fair enough. Let me just do. Yeah, here we go. So,
and that's we're at 25.
We're at which?
425.
425. All right. Let's see. 420. Okay, here we go. Let's give it a shot. See if we can turn off. We could mute so there's no echo without making the volume super soft. See if this works.
Nation that has ever existed, the wealthiest nation on the planet. And we have 40 million Americans living in poverty. We have 18.5 million Americans living in extreme poverty, according to the latest UN reports. Climate change is happening no matter how hard people try to deny its existence. And its outcomes are devastating, especially for millennials. And this is something that we need to focus on. And unfortunately, every single time we tried to bring about any sort of socialized solutions to these problems that the free market obviously fails to provide solutions for, we get called socialist, and that idea is inherently damaging. We live under an inherently oppressive capitalist dogma, and I'm here to talk about that because I think that at least questioning that and striving to find a better system is exactly what young people should be doing right now.
Right. So, inherently oppressive. So small business owners are oppressing their employees.
Come on, you're hyper-focusing on small business, dog. I'm talking about capitalism versus socialism.
Even though 85% of all jobs in this country are created by small businesses, even though this president, poverty rates have gone to the lowest level in the last 65 years.
Do you want to ask questions? Wait, hold on.
Let me finish. I let you finish, right?
Okay, go ahead.
Let me finish. 3.9 million Americans have gone off food stamps and into the labor force under this president. That should be applauded by everybody. When less people have to go to government for money and for meaning, and they instead are able to go to a job and have a paycheck, that's a good thing. And so the final thing I'll say is this, and you'll find disagreement. Just because someone gets rich does not mean someone gets poor. In order for you to get rich in a free market system, you must have a good idea. You must create value. You must employ people. You probably borrowed money. And you have an 80% chance of that business not succeeding. In a free market, yes, we applaud success, but you must take responsibility for failure. And you have seen in the last 100 years, the standard of living increase for all people across the world. Things get better, prices go down, and we are able to enjoy the abundance that only a free market system can create. You know what? I don't have to call you guys socialists. Bernie Sanders calls himself a socialist.
Yeah.
And we should reject socialism.
All right. I know that was just a minute, but a lot happened there. So
yeah. Well, what do you think? What do you think of how Hasan opened his remarks?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was a little. it was a little bit weird because the beginning discussion was about like Trump and all of the great things that had supposedly happened, because of Trump's policies. And so said, I want to talk about like capitalism and socialism in general. It's not necessarily what would have been my go-to in that moment, but maybe there's something to be said for it. It's like go to a more general, go to the ground you want to argue about, I guess. But you have thoughts?
I'm not sure how to debate Charlie Kirk. I'm just wondering, it just seems so easy for these debates to devolve very quickly because they're so general. Like the terrain is so generalized. So Kirk brought out these specifics, and then to debate capitalism versus socialism, there's not a lot of time to really define these terms very well, and so I'm a little skeptical of how well it could go. But
yeah, no, that's
plan. I'm sure he has a plan.
Fair. I mean, I think there's a reason why like more like narrowly defined debates are often better. But so Charlie here, he did one thing that, having watched the Kalinsky one and the Cedar one, he's so far done on all three, which is where he always loves to like trot out his line about how just because somebody's getting rich doesn't mean that somebody's getting poor. He loves that line. And then like he also did something interesting, right? Which is that he said, like, his two responses to capitalism are inherently exploitative. The first was to say, well, are you saying that small business owners are exploiting workers? I was like, no, everybody loves small business owners, right? And then within that, he's already shifting the terrain from, and I mean, I think this maybe is a beat that Hasan missed from what Hasan was saying, which is correct, which is that capitalism is exploitative, to this immediate discussion of like the morality of individuals, right? So you're saying that, small business owners, are exploiting their workers, because what Charlie presumably means by exploiting is like, I don't know, personally mistreating. And he said, oh, so you're saying that small business owners are bad people, which is not at all the point.
Right. I am a little concerned if this debate is for a general audience, though. Right. Exploit has a very specific definition within Marxism, right? So Charlie's kind of playing on sort of turning the word a little bit, right? To where Hasan means that workers are fundamentally exploited, and he'll probably explain that later. But I wonder I wonder how that sounds.
Yeah, and I mean, I think if you want to say that, I think that you should probably just like go the sort of Richard Wolff route and like spell it out in non-technical language. Say, well, under capitalism, workers don't get to decide like how like the value of their labor is divided up, right? I mean, like that's what, because of course that's what Hasan does mean by exploit, but because he just uses it, this is also 2018. He like I'm sure he's figured some of this out since then, but he just uses it without defining it. And of course, you're right. I mean, this is a general audience, Politicon, right? It's not like this is happening at a DSA convention. So most people, presumably, who are listening, don't have in their heads like the Marxist idea of what exploitation is. They just have like, oh, that's like a word for when you treat people really badly, or you're mean to to people who work for you, or something like that. And then of course he's going to it's about the small business owners, and I think that the thing that I would have liked to see Hasan point out at that moment is that it's not is that most people aren't small business owners, right? However many jobs might be created, which is also slightly funny way to put it, right? Like do you mean how many people currently work for? What does that mean? But like however many jobs might be created, however many people currently work for small businesses, most people aren't business owners of any kind. Most people are workers, and I think that would be the way to redirect that conversation. So it's not like, we're not arguing like, we're not like talking about, whether like small business owners have it tougher than other kinds of business owners. We're talking about what is the condition that most people exist in, and is this system good for that?
Yeah, totally. I think we should definitely have Charlie at the next DSA convention speaking. Yeah, I agree with you. Maybe he'll like later on get the conversation more on track. I think also real quick and then start is that I'm also thinking about, to what degree are they just playing to their bases as opposed to trying to convince people? So I guess like small business is kind of historically been at that vanguard of that like far right movement, right? So just like playing to that even more than its rhetorical force, right? Or it's hard to weigh which one he's even trying to do. Probably both.
I think it's a little bit of both, but I agree with you. Like I remember Big and Day had a good article about this last year. Jacobin, it was when the like anti-lockdown protests were first happening. It was called like Small Business Owners in the Barricades or something like that, and and it was making the exact point that you're making right now, that this tends to be like the social base of like hardcore conservative politics, and of course, I mean, this is what this is not a small thing that like this, but that exact trick that like when right-wingers talk about being economic populists to the extremely limited extent that it isn't bullshit. It's like 95% bullshit. But, the other 5% is what they mean is like, oh, we're like sticking up for like small business owners, right? That's the little guy they have in mind, but it's not the littlest guys, and it's also not most guys.
Yeah. I mean, they always seem so nice when you walk into a small business, so it's hard to believe, But
yeah. And of course, right, like lots of very small businesses, like places with 20 employees, 10 employees, whatever, are actually terrible places to work.
Yeah. Should we keep going?
Yeah. Let's keep going.
Yeah, no, we should. Yeah. It's very nice of you to immediately launch this accusation. Don't care for small businesses, or small businesses will never exist under a social democracy, kind of similar to small businesses in Nordic countries and with robust economies, but with also a powerful and protective social welfare programs and socialized safety nets. This exists everywhere around the world. All of the comparable Western democratic nations have been able to institute socialist principles, and that's precisely why their people are a lot happier. But then on top of that, what's really important to me is like focusing on the rate of growth and the GDP is great, but you can't answer this one simple question. Who cares what our GDP is if the person who is dying of abject poverty can't heal himself because we don't have a socialized medicine, for example?
So if you want to talk about healthcare solutions, happy to talk about it. You brought up Norway, Sweden, Finland. You would call those socialist countries?
No, I wouldn't call them socialist countries,
okay,
but they're definitely on a scale. Yeah, I said they're social democracies, which would be a more socialist country. Okay, look, if we're going to have this conversation, let's frame it.
I asked a very simple question.
No, we'll have a consensus on this first. Let me ask you a question, okay? Because this is like really improper framing, and a lot of people confuse socialism.
You said inherently exploitative. You framed the argument.
With capitalism, yeah, I did.
Okay, so that's and I rebutted that. So
how did you rebut that?
By talking about just because.
No, by talking about like what small businesses. It doesn't matter. Every single business still.
Let me say one thing. Norway, Sweden, and Finland, according to the World Economic Freedom Index, are ranked higher than the United States of America. That is not socialist. They have less tax. They have lower taxes.
So that means that you can have socialism and yet still have successful businesses in your country. Thank you for proving my point for me.
No,
I love this.
It's the exact opposite. You know what socialist is? Bernie Sanders wants an 80% tax rate on
Yeah,
the rich.
Venezuela
That's
too, right? Dude, listen,
No,
listen.
Bernie Sanders
won't
wants
let
to
me
keep our
describe
fossil fuel
it.
assets in the road.
You want me to explain it to you? Because you obviously don't understand it. Do you want me to explain it to
is
you?
Cuba not socialist? Is North Korea not socialist? Was Vietnam not socialist? Was Zimbabwe not socialist? You can laugh all you want, Hasan,
Okay, do you
but
want me to
100
explain it
million
to you?
people died under socialism the last 100 years, and you have the gumption to continue.
Okay.
You can keep laughing
Hold on.
to the victims' families from Cuba, from Venezuela, from Korea, from Vietnam, from Mao's China, from Stalin's Russia. The number one killer of citizens, from innocent civilians the last 100 years, has been the very idea that you shamelessly wear on your sleeve every single day. Marxism has killed more people than any other ideology over the last 100 years.
Okay. Thank you for those words.
You're welcome.
When 100 million people die under a communist dictatorship, and some of those millions are also Nazis, which is included there, whatever, you blame communism.
National Socialist Workers Party.
Or you blame socialism. But when 7 million people die every year under our current global capitalist environment, where just by famine alone, before we even talk about imperialism, and before we even talk about the damaging wars that are happening all around the world, then it's the individual. So you're essentially telling every single person that's poor, it's your fault that you're poor. It's your fault that you die under a capitalist system. But if you were under a communist system—
I have never said that.
I mean, that's literally what you're saying.
No, it's not.
So whose fault is it? Whose fault is it that 7 million people every year die just by famine-related diseases and famine under our current global capitalist structure?
Whose individual fault is it?
Yeah. Why is it with the system when it comes to communism, but it's actually
go from 40 years to 80 years in America for women and 76 years for women.
You're not answering my
Global
question.
poverty is at its all-time low than it ever has been.
But you're not
dropped below 10%.
You're not answering my question. You're not answering. You're talking about
There is
something
not a
completely
singular
different.
person why individuals might die, unfortunately. However, what's going to stop that?
It's unfortunate when they die.
Well, yes, yes, Hassan. Death is unfortunate.
Yeah,
Correct.
I know. I understand. But you
How
make
do you
it seem as
solve
though
these
they are
problems?
just a statistic.
So how do you solve it? So let's talk about healthcare in particular.
Okay.
Because a common critique of conservatives is that we do not have a plan for healthcare. It's quite simple. First of all, the idea that we do not have socialized medicine or a test case for it in the States is incorrect. The Veterans
Did you
Administration.
see the veterans? Oh, God.
$180 billion a year.
How
We
disgusting.
spend trying to help our veterans.
disgusting.
Hassan, let me finish. $180 billion a year we spend trying to help our veterans, and they wait in line. They die in the clinics. The quality care is unbelievably low. You cannot say that the Veterans Administration is a well-run government agency, despite us spending $180 billion a year trying to help our vets. We have seen
disgusting
what's
that
disgusting.
you would send these young men and women overseas to go fight not you. I'm talking about
against
conservatives
you.
in general. Just conservatives in general don't mind sending these young men and women overseas to fight imperialist conquests that have nothing to do with protecting America or protecting American sovereignty. Hold on. That's great. That's great. That's just one war, though. We're waging many currently. But then they come back, and the numbers have obviously increased. The number of casualties have increased. The treatment is drastically different than a regular pool of American citizens who aren't in the line of fire. How could you then turn around, not fund that system that we promised those veterans we would take care of them, not fund that system, and then use it as a talking point to say socialized medicine does not work? That is disgusting.
We should take care of our vets.
disgusting.
You know what's disgusting, Hassan? The fact that you defend that system. The fact that vets die waiting for care. Our vets are our heroes. First of all, I'm against the Afghanistan war, against the Iraq war, against our funding of Saudi Arabia's illegal war in Yemen. I'm against the missile strikes in Syria. So don't try to paint me in the same blend and the same brush that all neoconservatives are. Second of all, ironically, Donald Trump is making the world a safer place. The Korean War is ending thanks to Donald Trump. ISIS is on the run and being destroyed.
What does this have to do with us lying to our veterans that we were going to take care of them and then letting
the Veterans
them be homeless on the
Administration, which
streets,
is socialized medicine, the Veterans Administration, which is socialized medicine, does a disservice. You advocate for socialized medicine. I do not want the rest of the country.
I'm not saying the
to be
VA is
subjugated
good. I'm
to the
saying
same
that it's
level of care
underfunded.
that our veterans have to
You're
go through.
using that as a tool to just attack socialism,
A
attack
piece of
socialized
evidence.
medicine.
It's
When
called evidence,
This works
Hassan.
in every other country that has tried to do this. This works. The system absolutely
Cuba?
works.
How does the Cuban
fact-
healthcare system work?
The Cuban healthcare
system.
The Cuban healthcare system? Oh, you mean the country where they're on the verge of solving AIDS and a multitude of different cancer research? Like, what are you talking about?
Where their life expectancy is 15 years, less than the United States, where they have widespread starvation, where they lock up political dissidents. Why do people flee Havana, Cuba for Miami, Florida?
I don't know. Maybe our sanctions have something to do with it.
for Havana, Cuba.
All right. I think there's going to be no point trying to like come up with natural places to stop. We're just going to have to like stop every once in a while. This isn't one of those debates where one person talks and then there's a pause and then the other person talks. But
Yeah.
I am curious. Yeah, what are you saying?
No, I'm just saying it went off the rails so quickly, but I'm curious what you
I know it was like 90 seconds in and it was off the rails, which is funny because again, I mean, this is the third Charlie Kirk debate I watched, and the Cedar and Kalinsky debates definitely started out chiller than this. This was like pretty much started at like anybody who's tuning in now. What you just saw is like pretty much the way it was from like the first 30 seconds. But there are like three things going on since the last time we paused. So one of them was about the wars. And it does seem to me, at least from what I can tell from his Twitter account, like Charlie has done a little bit of a 180 on this. So the wars didn't really come up in the Sam Cedar debate, but they came up in the Kyle Kalinsky debate, and of course they also just came up here. And in both of those, he said the same thing. It's like, whoa, I don't have anything to do with that. What are you talking about? I'm against the wars. Whereas, I don't know, like his Twitter account lately has been all like, Joe Biden has like surrendered to the terrorists all the time. So maybe he's got some sort of like explanation of how this doesn't really make him pro-war. Maybe it's just that when it was a pro-Trump talking point that like Trump was like, winding down the wars or something, he was for that. But now it's like an anti-Biden talking point that, he left the service dogs in Afghanistan. So that's what he's going with now.
Yeah. I mean, in researching him, and this won't come as a surprise to anyone, you're not going to get ideological consistency from him, and he'll say something and then say the opposite and claim he never said it. So it's going to be hard to track down any particular claim on him, which also makes someone slippery in a debate, I guess, because if they can just claim any viewpoint that's, convenient at the time. But yeah, I guess at this point he's going more with the isolationist track. And also this is a little off track for the debate, right?
Yeah, right. I assume that, it's a little hard to tell from what they've talked about so far, but I assume that the larger thing is supposed to be capitalism and socialism.
Right. It's definitely careening from topic to topic. I actually wanted to get your viewpoint on the thing that it was kind of a smaller point, but they were having the whole Nordic debate and kind of the rote way that it usually happens, right? Where the conservatives try to say, no, that's not, there's that meme of like, well, hey, that's not actually socialism. And it's like, well, if it's not socialism, why don't we try it? And it's like, oh, because it's socialism, right? But he points to the economic freedom index and I'm not familiar with that, so I'm just wondering if where they get that, if you have that
that's like a pretty common conservative talking point, and it's always really weird because like there are a few of those like freedom indexes floating around from libertarian, quasi-libertarian kind of think tanks, and the methodology is like often really unclear. I remember one of them I read like somebody actually did like a detailed breakdown where they figured out like how like all the different things they were using and what score they and what weight they assigned to each of them. And some of it was just hilarious. Like I think this was like a Cato one where they didn't count like the laws about abortion towards like how free a country was, because they said like, because that's like controversial whether that's in a freedom, but they did count like whether you were allowed to have like raw milk as a freedom thing. So I suspect that this doesn't really track very much like most of what libertarians are arguing about with social democrats and socialists, when they argue about freedom. Like, especially, I think some of it, like, even when they are talking about things that's like, okay, you can see why they're describing that as an economic freedom issue. It's not really the kind of thing they're mostly talking about, when they say, like, oh, you can't, whatever, you can't raise the minimum wage. You can't mandate vaccines, you know, because that's on freedom. But then like it'll turn out that like part of what they're talking about with the freedom index is like basically how much paperwork you have to do to start a small business. And it's like, yeah, but that's fine, right? I mean, like that's something that any like normal social democrat would be like, yeah, sure, go for it, right? I mean, like streamline that. That's great, you know. Like that's not, you know, what like the kind of thing that we care about is making sure that, you know, there are minimum wage laws and workplace safety laws and, you know, and all this stuff. And, you know, also some of it is complicated because one thing that they will point out sometimes, in fact, I would not be shocked if, you know, they careen back to the Nordics at some point if this comes up, is that they will sometimes point out that there are some Nordic countries that don't have minimum wage laws, which is true, but what they will never, you know, what they'll never say is the other half of that, right? Which is like, okay, yeah, you don't have minimum wage laws, but you do have vastly more favorable labor laws for unions, you know, that existed certainly in the United States. I mean, the United States has, like, as you know very well, like the worst one in the developed world. But you know, they have very like favorable laws for, you know, starting unions, and like they have really powerful union federations that'll do like sector-wide bargaining and establish wage floors that way. So it's like, yeah, there are no minimum wage laws, and you know, whatever, there should be, but like, but also that doesn't mean that like the market just decides what everybody gets paid.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that there's a lot of honesty going on in those talking points, unless it's a misunderstanding. I mean, if you really, you know, got them to admit what they believe about the Nordic countries, I don't think that they're like, oh yeah, we should adopt those policies. So
yeah, right, exactly. And there's a lot of cherry picking too. Like they'll do this thing where, okay, and granted, I think that there's probably a lot of like Nordic hive mind thinking on all sides of this, where, because like there's a certain kind of like, you know, quasi social democratic liberal who thinks that the way that they have things in Nordic countries is nice, but doesn't really recognize that like Sweden isn't Sweden because everybody goes to the same Lutheran church. Sweden is Sweden because of sustained intense class struggle and like, you know, like incredibly like militant union activity and stuff, you know, building socialist party that like got them to the point where they are now. So people will talk about it as if it were just this sort of neutral technocratic decision. You know, it's like, oh yeah, these countries decided it would be better if, you know, they took care of everybody's basic needs, you know. Yeah. But like the right-wing version of the Nordic hive mind thesis is where they'll say, oh, well, look at this market reform that this or that Nordic country had to implement, you know, because this overly socialist stuff wasn't working. And you're like, no, what you're describing is just like, yeah, these are complex societies that are, you know, divided up ideologically and by economic interest and everything else in the exact same way every other society in the world is. And sometimes right-wing parties take power and like they implement right-wing policies. That's not like, oh, the country as a whole collectively realized that some social democratic policy wasn't working. So like they always like to bring up like Sweden, I think, like, you know, put in like some charter school stuff, you know, educational vouchers. But it's like, okay, but Finland doesn't have private schools. Like they have a public monopoly on primary and secondary education. And like there are all kinds of rankings that say that Finland has the best school system in the world. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's complicated because I do think that it is useful to be able to point to the Nordics as like places where a lot of social democratic policies are successfully beta tested. We know they work out well and all that stuff. But also it's like, yeah, of course. I mean, sometimes like, you know, sometimes things flow our way and like good stuff is implemented in those countries. And sometimes, you know, but like obviously, you know, the capitalist class still exists in those places and they have every vested interest in like rolling that back when they get a chance. And sometimes they do.
Right. I mean, on that note, I mean, I think they try to make socialists own any kind of failure of bureaucracy, that's socialism, right? Which kind of the other major thing they talked about is the VA, which I think, the simple answer is just that the VA is underfunded, and the conservatives, are pointing toward that underfunding as that, hey, that government programs fails. But do you think there's anything more complicated going on there, or do you think it's pretty simple trick that Kirk?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the one thing that is complicated there is that it is certainly true that the VA should be funded more. And it is certainly true that for certain kinds of things, especially people with like PTSD, look, in general, psychiatric care in the United States is really bad and is not taken seriously. And it's certainly true that like people sometimes have to wait for a long time for that stuff, and it's a travesty, right? They should obviously, the VA should get a bunch more money so they can hire a ton more psychiatrists for sure. Right. But it's also kind of funny in like a few ways when they bring this up, because despite those very real problems, you have it remains the case that the Veterans Administration is actually pretty popular with veterans. I remember Matt Brunig at the People's Policy Project, had this nice post once where he talked about how opponents of Medicare for All always trotted out these statistics when most people said they're satisfied with their health coverage. And, he made all the obvious points about that. What does that really mean? Right. If you haven't really had to use it, you're just yeah, sure, I guess. Right. Or what does satisfied mean? Right. Does that mean that you like it better than you would like it if the government just paid for it? Or does it mean that you think that realistically, given what exists now, you're probably better off than you'd be with whatever else you can afford? Probably the second one. But also, if we're going to play that game, the two groups that actually list the highest rates of satisfaction with their healthcare are seniors on Medicare and active duty military and veterans. And so I think that despite the very real problems of the VA, I think that is a little exaggerated. I think if you the poll question I'd really like to see is how many veterans think that the VA should be privatized.
Right. That's a better point. And if he brings
abolish the VA, just try your luck, on the exchanges.
Yeah, well, we'll see later that if you put anything in the free market, it's going to get extremely, extremely efficient. So we're definitely going to learn that over the course of this debate. But is there?
Yeah, well, I did also want to say on the healthcare point. Charlie, just before the point where we stopped, did something odd, right? So he has two examples of socialized healthcare being bad, were the VA in the United States and the Cuban healthcare system, and the second one is a really funny example because, Cuba's healthcare system in a lot of ways, is not, it's a very mixed bag. There are things about it that are definitely suffering. Some of that really is because of the embargo. I know that's kind of the cliche. It's oh yeah, leftists will blame everything on the embargo, but really in this case, I think the argument's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of medical equipment that if the United States has you under embargo, good luck finding it. Because this is where it's manufactured, but even aside from that, it's okay. It's a third world country with limited resources, but also they have the best doctor to patient ratio in the world. Also, there are definitely at least parts of the United States with worse infant mortality than Cuba.
Well, yeah, their life expectancy is 78 years. I don't know where he just says it's 15 years lower than ours. So isn't that just
the United States?
Just a straight up lie?
I don't think so.
Yeah, he says it's 15 years lower than ours. I think that's a straight up lie. I think they're commensurate with ours. So it just which you get to be prepared on that, I guess.
Which itself is remarkable because it's a third world country with very limited resources. that's been under embargo from its largest natural trading partner for half a century. And so it's like, even the measures where they're about equivalent to the U.S., that itself is an amazing accomplishment under those circumstances. And there are obviously measures like doctor-patient ratio, infant mortality, where they're actually doing better than ours. Yeah, I don't know. I just looked it up and it says the life expectancy of the United States is also 78 point something. So I don't know what he's talking about there. But also I would say, like, all right, let's pretend for the sake of argument that the Cuban healthcare system is as bad as Charlie wants to portray it as being, which is clearly not, because even in his defense, just before we cut off of that claim, he pivoted from talking about the healthcare system to talking about all kinds of things about Cuba that have nothing to do with the healthcare system, right? He's talking about, why do people flee from Cuba to Miami? And there are a lot of reasons, but like the healthcare system is not one of them, right? Like that's not the thing that's getting anybody to immigrate to the United States. I mean, certainly it's not on the certainly it's not in the top 10. I mean, sometimes, yeah. I mean, the political repression exists in Cuba. We should admit that, but but also lots of it is economic, because it's a third world country that's been under embargo from its larger national trading partner, for 50 years. And sure, also whatever inefficiencies exist within the Cuban system itself, that's fine, right? But but we know that it's possible. He wants to clump together the two issues, like, there's political repression in Cuba, right? Unlike all the Latin American countries the United States likes, Cuba has political repression, and there's political repression in Cuba, and they have socialized healthcare. Where, okay, fine. Like, if you want to talk about healthcare, let's disaggregate those, because we know perfectly well that one can exist without the other. The UK has the same healthcare system that Cuba does, more or less. I mean, it's got the it goes way beyond Medicare for all. The government owns the hospitals and pays the doctors. And they have a higher life expectancy than the United States, lower infant mortality, lower rate of mortality amenable to healthcare. So I mean, I think the track record is pretty. The track record is really good, and then I think especially if you started doing what Antonio points out in the comments and compared the Cuban healthcare system to the healthcare systems of comparable Latin American countries, then I think it starts to look really good. I mean, look at the the morbid little game that I was playing for a while last year, is every once in a while I check to see the number of people who died of COVID in Cuba, and then I compare it to the county in Michigan that I come from. For a long time, eventually Cuba reopened to tourism, and they came out ahead, although not by that much. But this county in Michigan, with I know it's not a one-to-one comparison, it's not an island, but this county in Michigan, with obviously a tiny fraction of the population, for a long time was beating Cuba. And certainly, if you compare compare islands to islands, right? I mean, compare Cuba to Puerto Rico. And your chances of dying of COVID last year as a Puerto Rican are vastly better than your chances of dying as a Cuban.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we might want to get back to the video, but we didn't even really address the list of countries that he calls socialist.
Oh, yeah, Zimbabwe.
North Korea.
Yeah. I mean, so some of them he's he's listed off, countries that's okay, right? We can have a terminological debate, people love to on the left, about, how to use the word socialism, and whether that, we say, okay, is this a kind of authoritarian state socialism, or is this best described as something else, bureaucratic collectivism, or, state capitalism, or whatever, right? But it's okay, at least I know what he means when he says that's socialist. I have no fucking clue what he means when he says that Zimbabwe is socialist.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's even worth addressing in these, because the debate's really going to go off the rails, right? You start
and we will go back to it, but I mean, lastly, before that, like, okay, he says the Nordics aren't socialist, Bernie Sanders is socialist, confusing enough already. But also, you'll notice when he was rattling off the bad socialist countries, he said that Vietnam was socialist. So it's like, wait a second, is Vietnam not socialist? Because I'm pretty sure that Vietnam today, the state plays a larger role in the economy than the United States if all of Bernie Sanders' like 2020 campaign proposals were enacted.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go back.
Okay, maybe it's because people did not want to willingly give away their land.
But I'm not here defending Cuba. I don't give a shit about Cuba, dog. I'm talking about America.
No, you just
and I'm
said
talking about
they're
comparable
solving AIDS,
nations.
which is
I'm talking about
categorically
comparable
false.
nations. We are talking about socialized medicine in comparable nations. Are you going to say that America and Cuba are virtually identical? I think that Canada is a better example, and there are definitely problems within the Canadian healthcare system. Again, due to privatization and due to underfunding and crippling the institution from within because of privatized policies. This is all private enterprise is grossly responsible for the lack of affordable healthcare in this country. It shouldn't even be affordable. It should be free. This is what the people want.
Nothing is free, Hasan.
82% of Americans, 82% of Americans want Medicare for all. 52% of Republicans want Medicare for all. The only people at this point, the only people who are standing firmly against Medicare for all are just essentially saying, look, I don't care. I love corporate lobbyists. I think big pharma should continue to increase their profits. And it doesn't matter if you can't live a dignified life without the crippling fear that if you lose your job, you might lose your health care and you might literally die. And if you can't fund your medicine, if you can't fund your health care, then you should beg on the internet through crowdsourcing.
Again, Hasan, you are virtue signaling constantly because you are implying that just because I have a different policy perspective, that I care less about these people.
I mean,
the free market system.
If you're against it, that's what you want.
So in every single sector and vertical, allow me to finish.
Okay, you want private housing,
whether it be in food, whether it be in anywhere the free market is allowed to interact, which we do not have a free market system in healthcare right now. You cannot buy health insurance across state lines. We have a national quota for doctors. We have the FDA that disallows entrepreneurs to compete against big pharma by having patents for 30 years so that people with great ideas.
You think FDA regulation is bad when it comes to medicine? There are certain elements of regulation that is bad, but I want you to be very specific. No, you can't just throw 8 different points.
Let me finish. How about a 30-year patent on a drug that disallows someone with a better idea that would bring down the price of the drug so that the middle class could have the same sort of treatment that the rich and powerful have? That's
the regulation that you think I'm against?
No, I'm not saying you're against it. I'm saying what I'm for, Hasan.
I think we should look.
Again, let me finish.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, you're right.
The free market allows itself to three really, really big things. It allows prices to go down, quality to go up, and abundance to go outward. Everywhere it's tried, whether it be grocery stores, whether it be housing, if the laws of the market do not stop working just because it's in healthcare, whether it be LASIK eye surgery used to cost $20,000 per eye. Insurance companies
technological advancements that are
because of the free market
more affordable.
The insurance companies would not cover the LASIK eye surgery. It was a cash business. Doctors went outside of the traditional system, and all of a sudden now it costs $500 per eye for LASIK eye surgery.
Everything you're saying is flat out false. And also,
what's false about that?
Because we live under a mixed economy, Charlie. So it's a consequence of both publicly funded research and also certain private elements. So when you try to turn around and look at technological advancements that are happening in virtually every field, virtually every field on an international scale, and assume that this is just a consequence of free market capitalism, well, let's talk. Yeah, no, it's actually unicorns, dude. Unicorns are giving us magically the
Hasan, answer me a question.
If we're going to lie about this stuff, then we might as well just go all the way out.
Does insurance cover LASIK?
Does insurance
cover LASIK?
What does that have to do with anything?
Because when you don't have the insurance lobby within the negotiating of prices, then the consumer knows exactly what everything costs. The reason why healthcare costs so much in this country, you go into a hospital, no one knows what anything costs. No one knows what anything costs for how long you stay there, for how long the procedure is. A key component of a market is pricing.
Yeah.
The problem with the system
we live in a country that is virtually the only country on the planet that does not negotiate drug prices. Even Donald Trump said he was going to do this, and he's failed to deliver on that promise, among many other promises, like he was going to solve the economy or that he was going to bring about world peace. Like, this is preposterous to assume that, like, insurance, you could just unjustifiably just throw out a claim without expecting me to, I can't even talk, holy shit, refute it. When you say, when you make this ridiculous assertion that insurance companies are actually decreasing prices when it's not the government
no, they're not.
It's regulating
Hasan,
them.
I asked a very specific question.
What?
LASIK eye surgery,
But then you
not covered by insurance.
Okay.
Consumers went straight to the doctor, so they knew how much it cost. Therefore, prices went down, quality went up, and accessibility went outward. That's what happens when a market is allowed to exist.
So why is it in virtually every other? Because I don't know the ins and outs of the complicated LASIK surgery, and I'm willing to bet that you don't either. You just know a talking point about it, but it doesn't matter. Look. But none of this matters because you are hyper-focusing on LASIK surgery. Are all Americans? Is this the most important problem that all Americans have to face when it comes to our current obesity
I'm really glad you asked.
When it comes to the cancer rate in the U.S.,
Hasan,
which is good. We're good on cancer if you can afford it.
So how do you get things to cost less? Competition, which is inherent in a free market.
Regulation
raises prices. Regulation prices out middle-class consumers. Regulation is a tool used by corporations to go after small business owners. That is why the biggest corporation.
The small business owner like Pfizer. You're right, dude. Come on,
Pfizer
dude.
has a $100 million a year government lobbying budget.
I hate that. We agree on that.
That is corporatism.
Yeah.
That is not capitalism. It's different when you have a good idea versus buying lobbyists, sending them to D.C., saying, put all these rules and regulations that I can afford, but the entrepreneur from Silicon Valley that has a 5-person company cannot afford $20 million.
So why is it cheaper in other countries, Charlie? Explain that to me. If it's not government price negotiations, why is it cheaper in virtually every other country? As a matter of fact, this is a ridiculous talking point because like conservatives have, for the most part, maybe not Charlie, but I am willing to hear your perspective on this. Conservatives, for the most part, have like completely decided that the whole regulation conversation is ridiculous and have gone so far as to say that we are subsidizing healthcare for the rest of the world because we are the most innovative nation when it comes to medicine. It's preposterous. Every other nation is able to do this, and these companies are still selling to them. Obviously, they're not selling out of the goodness of their heart because there's no such thing. It's all profit motive, right? So they're capable of lowering drug prices here in the United States as well. But the only reason why they won't, and you're correct on this, I will tell you, because obviously I'm very anti-lobby here and anti-corporatist and anti-capitalist as well, which, by the way, lobbying is inherently a capitalist structure. You constantly talk about how money is
corporatist. Is difference.
Okay, corporatist and capitalist. Like the two go hand in hand.
Those are not the same thing. That's like saying
crony capitalism is just unfettered capitalism, and you are constantly, on the one hand, arguing against regulation, and then on the other hand saying, well, it's not true capitalism. Okay. Which one is it? Should we regulate capitalism so it doesn't turn into crony capitalism?
I think we should massively deregulate the American economy. I'm not saying to abolish every single piece of regulation. But when regulations,
specifically?
Let me finish.
Except for like the patent one, which I'm on board with as well.
What regulation specifically? How about Dodd-Frank? That'd be a great start. That disallows community banks from competing against Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase. The big banks wrote Dodd-Frank. That is why we've seen an 80% decrease in community banks over the last 8 years since the passage of Dodd-Frank, because it makes it nearly impossible for community banks to be able to compete with the Wall Street banks. I will say this.
What Charlie fails to mention with Dodd-Frank is like...
I interrupt you.
No, what Charlie fails to mention with Dodd-Frank, and you can't say this and not mention this part, there are plenty of fail-safes within Dodd-Frank, which was imperfect, I will admit. There are plenty of fail-safes that were also taken away. For example, the fiduciary responsibility. So if you're an old person and you go up to a bank, that your banker can virtually make any sort of risky financial decision they want to now because they took that away so that the bankers could make more money off of your money that they're playing around with. This is the kind of deregulation that already caused the 2008 housing market crash.
I'm not going to get into
No, you're not going to
Fannie
get
and Freddie rating
agencies. I know what the fuck
Federal
you're
Reserve,
talking about.
Federal Reserve lowering, Federal Reserve lowering interest rates. Hold on, what's Fannie and Freddie, genius? What's Fannie and Freddie? Tell me what that is. Tell me about the rating agencies. Okay. Tell me about how we should have allowed Wells Fargo to pay a price, and those people should be in prison right now for doing what they did.
I agree.
And lying to federal regulators.
Charlie sounds like
a Democrat Congress and a Democrat Senate.
Advocating to jail bankers. I'm on board, dog. Let's do it right now.
Talking over each other for the next 45 minutes, or you can let me finish. The final thing I'll say on banking regulation, one of the biggest misrepresentations of reality is somehow that free market capitalism contributed to the 2008 financial crisis. It was the rating agencies in bed with Fannie and Freddie Mac doing AAA bond rating with B and B- rated bonds. No one looked what they were actually rating. It was the government institutions that were telling Wall Street to continue to go after subprime mortgage lending. They did credit default swaps on top of it, leveraging the entire American economy with Alan Greenspan artificially lowering interest rates after 9/11, playing with cheap money. Pair that with the Community Reinvestment Act, and no one actually knowing what they're trading.
I don't like liberal
all
dog.
certified
We're on the same page.
by Washington.
We're on the same page, but you sound a lot like a communist when you make those points. I'm just going to let you know. When you're like, let's jail bankers, let's regulate both our politicians and also these corporations. You can't just sit here and say that it's deregulation.
Hasan,
you keep mentioning the failures of capitalism, and then your solution to the failures of capitalism is more capitalism, more free market,
failure of statism. Well, you know, how about the failure? How about the successes of free market capital?
Yeah. So this is another thing that these guys love doing, is saying that all of the ills of actually existing capitalism can be blamed on corporatism or crony capitalism, which basically means that people who own lots and lots of resources use their wealth in order to lobby for rules that unfairly benefit them. And the thing that always gets me about this is when, quite apart from as somebody says, somebody said in the chat, right? It's definitely like there's definitely some tension between socialism has been a disaster and North Korea and Zimbabwe, which are both socialist countries, but also we don't have real capitalism, corporatism. But quite apart from that, like when you okay, forget the labels for a second. When you say capitalism is great, it's just crony capitalism, it's bad. It's like, okay, so what's your solution then? That suddenly everybody who has concentrated wealth is just going to virtuously stop using it to influence politicians to rig rules on their behalf?
Yeah, and this goes toward kind of to drain the swamp rhetoric, right? Of some kind of rhetorical nod toward these issues, which I'm not really clear on what the policy solution is that Charlie's proposing. It gets pretty confusing in there. Also, shout out to the moderators really doing great work there and keeping this debate on track. He's super. It's great. These debates are usually overly moderated, so I think his laissez-faire, free market approach, I really like it. But
I think I honestly forgot there was a moderator. It's like, oh yeah, who's that dude sitting between them? Is he a friend of Charlie's, or
he's just a lucky fan who got who they invited on stage? But yeah, was there anything else that jumped out at you? It's kind of like a.
Yeah, so I think that's the biggest thing is that's corporatism, not capitalism, right? Which is if you or I said, here's our idea for how socialism could work. We're gonna have a centralized state apparatus. There's going to be a planning office like Gosplan in the USSR. All the structures are going to be the same, but this one's good. The difference is that there won't be any corruption. Presumably the Charlie Kirks of the world would very correctly not be impressed by that, right? This is okay, so it's going to be exactly what existed before, but no corruption this time. But that's what he's doing when he says, the problem isn't capitalism, it's corporatism. Real capitalism doesn't have that. It's he's just redefining real capitalism to mean capitalism where miraculously there's no political corruption or regulatory capture. And I'd be really fascinated to know what the plan is there. As you said, Trump, like to talk about draining the swamp, but that obviously did not happen. And if you even the sort of incredibly inadequate liberal solutions like campaign finance reform, it's okay, so he'd be in favor of that. Is that like, that doesn't sound very laissez-faire, right? You're stopping people from you're stopping people from using their money, for political speech. So that part just seemed like, none of these guys have like grappled with that at all, right? Like how is it that we achieve this magical capitalism? It's not cronyistic, which really, look, you want to stop wealth, like if you have concentrations of wealth, that's always going to find ways to translate itself into concentrations of political power. Like, good luck with that. Like, if nothing else, there's always that like capitalist veto of threatening to leave the country, if and pull your factories out or whatever, if you don't get your way. But you have to actually do something about the economic power if you want to do something about their political power. But yeah, I guess the other thing is there's like Charlie was kind of giving like the canned conservative version of the 2008 crash, which is basically that, what happened then is entirely because of the government meddling in the housing market through Fannie and Freddie, which are not exactly public entities anyway, but whatever, to like force people to give home loans to poor people. Like, that's basically what they mean, right? And that's, not right. Like like some of the lending practices he's talking about is like, it's like Fannie and Freddie are a very small part of that story, and also I think there is like a reasonable story that you could tell about deregulation, like the end of Glass-Steagall, meaning that you could have different kinds of banking combined within the same bank, leading to incredible consolidation. That I think there's a plausible story about how that like encouraged riskier behavior, because you have like the banks had such deeper pockets now. But in any case, anyway, I guess all I would add to that is that what I would have liked, what I would have liked. This is actually the place, right? Some of this, I think Hasan is airing way too far. And again, this is 2008 Hasan, 2018 Hasan. But so it is 3 years ago. If you went back and watched like the first debate I did with like Dave Smith or whatever, like years ago, I'd look pretty bad too. But there are a lot of places in here where I think he's like not quite engaging with the specifics of what Kirk is saying enough, and he's just sort of like pivoted to socialist generalities. But this is the one place where I wish he'd do that and just be like, okay, great. So like, you want to nationalize the banks?
Right. To give him credit, I appreciate the troll of saying this kind of sound, of saying you want to jail banker. Like jailing political dissidents. I don't know if that's, I didn't expect to kind of hear that from Charlie. So I do appreciate the move that he did there. I was curious finally, before we go back, what you thought about the move he was making on healthcare. He was blaming it all on these regulation issues, which is like, also, I don't think patent regulation is that really I don't really see that as a particularly, like right-wing issue, right? Like that, these 30 years patents that he's made. So, but he blames everything on that, which I think is pretty quickly, but it's an interesting move, I would say.
No, it is an interesting move. Like, so is what Charlie has suggested here that we like shouldn't have patents be for that long, that we should have like a more liberal intellectual property regime? Because like, if so, great, right? Like that sounds good. Especially pharmaceutical patents, that'd be nice. But it's as you say, it's not, like, I don't, it's certainly not a proposal. It's a big part of right-wing politics, and if it was, I think there'd probably be a lot of convergence on that. But I guess the one other thing I did want to say from earlier is when Charlie's going on about LASIK eye surgery.
Yeah, it's really funny, but yeah.
Yes, that's the whole, that like one specific example about very new technology, like, proves that like a totally laissez-faire, healthcare system would be great. But, and of course you can't get eye surgery in Canada. But also though, like, pay attention to the structure of what he's saying here. It's a point that a lot of right-wingers kind of like to make. I think I actually remember, like, when I used to hate listen to Rush Limbaugh on AM radio in the car. I remember him making comments like this sometimes. They'll do this weird thing where they sort of make it sound like their solution for the really, really free market in healthcare is to somehow, like, abolish health insurance. Like, they never say that. They never spell it out. But if they're not saying that, I don't really know what the point is. There's this sort of talking point about how, well, costs aren't controlled because supply and demand doesn't work the way that it's supposed to because your insurance will pay for it, right? Like, I remember, like, Rush Limbaugh years ago saying, like, imagine how much hotels would cost if, like, you didn't pay out of pocket. It's just like you had hotel insurance. It's like, okay. But, like, if that's what you're saying, I really want to hear it, right? So, I mean, this is a place where, again, I would have liked Hasan to engage a little bit more on the particulars and be like, so that's your solution? I mean, are you going to ban health insurance? Like, if not, spell out what it is that you're going to do that's going to lead to this better functioning market in, like, direct healthcare.
Right. I mean, he said earlier that, like, the unassailable logic of the free market, right? It doesn't stop because you're in housing or healthcare. So it does seem like he's kind of promoting this, bringing it to this logical extreme. But I'm not sure if I saw in the comments someone said he does kind of go there, but I'm not sure if he's going there.
Yeah, it's also like it's such a weird, like, it's such a dogmatic ideological thing to say. It's like, well, there cannot possibly be anywhere where markets don't, have optimal results compared to anything else. Like, I don't know, really? I mean, like, it seems like we've got a lot of empirical evidence that in this particular area, the best healthcare systems in the world are all of the good healthcare systems in the world are at the very least much less marketized.
That's because you just haven't seen that perfect marketplace healthcare that is yet to exist. But once we get there, it's like you're going to see some.
Right. Again, I mean, if you're going to play that game, it's like, oh, well, see, the problem with the Soviet Union is that it wasn't communist enough. Like, if we had, like, real, like, if we went all the way to, there was, instead of Soviet citizens getting paid in rubles that they took to the state store, if there were the labor value certificates for the critique of the Gotha program, then it would have been great. I don't imagine he'd be very impressed with that. I think his response would probably be, okay, so you think hypothetical socialism with no real world antecedents whatsoever would be great. It's just any socialism that's ever existed would be bad. But it's like, that's exactly what they're saying about healthcare. That, the United States has one of the most marketized healthcare systems in the entire world, and we have, like, really shitty healthcare outcomes. But no, that'd be great if we had even more marketized. Then hypothetically, we're sure that would be great because, like, look at our freshman macroeconomics textbook with the supply and demand graphs, and, like, this is clearly how everything actually works out because our theory insists that it does.
We should probably go back soon, I guess. But I'll just I mean, I appreciate that Hasan early on says that, we live in a mixed economy and most economies are, but it's very hard to, like, define the terms of the debate with him. But I don't know, you want to, like, bring out that reality, but I know it's difficult when he's careening back to these.
No, and I think I guess, due credit. I mean, I think Hasan did have a good moment very early on. I actually kind of wish that he'd stuck with this and emphasized a little bit more, because it was, I think, even if this isn't necessarily exactly how I would think of it, I don't even care. Like, it's like it was a good way to try to redirect the debate to much clearer terms, and ones that I think he could have made a pretty good argument with, which was when when Charlie asked him if the Nordics were socialist countries. He said, well, no, but there's a spectrum, and they're clearly further along on the spectrum. And that, I think if he stuck with it, and I understand, I mean, this is very easy to Monday night quarterback, and it, while you're in this weird freewheeling debate where the moderator is zoned out and and is never going to interrupt anywhere. It can be very hard to do this, but I mean, to the extent that you can build a narrative over the course of the debate instead of just responding to individual points, then you should do that. And I think this would have been a good narrative for Hasan here to say, look, here are the things that make the Nordics further along on the spectrum, and these are the things that I also would like for the United States, and those are going to be the terms of the argument. I'm going to insist on it, right? Why don't you, hey, all of these places have, it varies country by country, but but they all have unfathomably more socialized, healthcare systems than the United States does, right? I mean, in some of the specific cases, it's yeah, there might be a few private hospitals, but most hospitals are owned by the government, things like that. Mm-hmm. That seems to work out better for them, right? Why don't you want that, Charlie? Right? I don't want to talk about what the Hispanic unemployment rate is, or whether what exactly caused the 2008 financial crash, right? What I want this debate to be about is, do you think that the United States should implement the things that these companies?
Not? From a labor organizing perspective, right? We talk about inoculation, right? Which is when you bring up exactly what the union buster is going to say. This is an obvious debate tactic as well, right? But it really takes the sting out of their argument. And when someone's as predictable as some of these guys are, hey, everyone, they're going to tell you, they're going to bring up this, these random, especially if the talking points are random, like LASIK eye surgery, it's going to be harder for Charlie to bring that up. And I think it might fluster him a little bit. That narrative.
That for sure. I mean, I did some of them. Yeah, I mean, Charlie for sure. I mean, again, the Hispanic unemployment rate. If somebody's getting rich, that doesn't mean somebody's getting poor. There are certain lines.
Nothing is free with the mic drop, and he looks so self-satisfied. Oh man, nothing's free because he pays for it. He's done.
Yeah, that'll get him. And again, maybe it's kind of a normally liberal sort of response, but I think, you mean the fire department would have gone a long way there? It's these things that are paid for by our neighbor. Yes, I pay for them. My neighbors pay for them. Everybody pays for them. We arrange a fair system for how everybody's going to pay for it with progressive taxation, and then everybody benefits from it, but it's free at the point of service, so nobody ever worries they're not going to afford it or they're going to lose access to it if they lose their job. And, isn't that better? I think that would be the response to that. Nothing is free, just to say.
He didn't get to get that in there, which I'm not saying it's his fault, but
no, but he didn't get that. Just to say yes. Thank you. I understand. So it's been funded. What I mean by free, what everybody means by free, when they say that, is free at the point of service because it's paid for by progressive taxation. Now let's talk about why you don't want that, and also whether you'd like to have the fire department and the police department start charging for services, and whether you think that would go better. Which he might say yes, but great, right? I mean, Elizabeth Brunig, I remember saying, half the point of a debate is to get the other person to tell you what they really think. And, if that's what he thinks, that's a win right there in terms of reaching out to most of the audience. But yeah, I think we'll get back to it, but I think definitely some of these guys are just that predictable. I mean, I did a few months ago, I did debate with the libertarian economist Gene Epstein, and I'd seen both of them before, but I rewatched the one he did with Bhaskar, and I rewatched the one he did with Richard Wolff, and based on those, I was like fairly sure I was actually so sure of what he was going to say, like in his own statement, that like my first response, like I actually just like wrote out in advance, and I did not have to deviate it from it that much, because like he's going to say what he's going to say at these things. And yeah, I think that inoculation, like union organizing tactic you're talking about, would have gone a long way here. Like, yeah, it's like, I understand you're going to say that just because somebody's getting rich doesn't mean somebody's getting poor, but here's my point about economic inequality.
Right. I wish that when he brought up LASIK eye surgery, someone was like, you know what, I didn't think of that. Like, I'm done. Like, you're right. Like, that's yeah. But I don't know. I guess it gets him somewhere. Should we go back?
Let's watch.
The fact that we have abundance in light, air conditioning, the fact that we have more food that we throw away every single year than we actually eat, the fact that in the Western world,
think that's a good thing? You think that our waste is a good thing, dude?
We have an abundance problem in the West, not a scarcity problem.
Yeah.
In Venezuela, the average Venezuelan has lost 17 pounds. Oh, yes? 4,000% inflation. Yes. Brink on the Civil War.
Venezuela,
yes.
the only socialist country on the planet, everybody.
Yes. The fact they have 42% unemployment. Yes. The fact that Maduro continues to exploit his citizens around the lies of Karl Marx. Yes. Is that what we're talking about, Hasan?
Yes. I love that you think you owned. Oh my God.
First of all, can I just stop you guys?
Hold on. No, you can't just let him.
Okay, all right.
You can't just let him throw away the Republican Despacito, which is every single time the dirty S word is mentioned, he's like, "Oh, Venezuela, dude."
All right, I'll give you.
I get it. You can't. No. You got to let me talk. You got to let me talk. You did your dance and you said Venezuela. You got it out, and I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. It's the ultimate defense. Like I said, Venezuela has virtually the same Venezuela has socialized its extraction industries, which is why it is extremely comparable to a Nordic country like Norway. If socialism successfully is implemented, or at least social democracies are successfully implemented in countries like Norway, then some countries fail because they're corrupt or because of currency mismanagement or because of a variety of different reasons like the IMF or American sanctions or even backing military coups in the country, which Donald Trump, apparently the world leader in peace, is toying around with, as if that has worked ever in Latin American countries or anywhere worldwide. Like, there are a multitude of different reasons why socialism or a more robust social state has not worked in Venezuela, but it obviously has been successful in other countries.
Like Zimbabwe, Cuba, Vietnam, North Korea, former Bulgaria, former Belarus,
Charlie,
East Germany, Soviet Union. Those were great test cases for socialism, right?
I'm glad that you know countries. I'm glad that you are demonstrating that despite our public education system, you are still knowledgeable on different countries. Stop naming countries and let me finish, okay? All right. So ridiculous, dude. At this point, you guys all have to be aware that this is a ridiculous notion, right? There are plenty of socialized countries around the planet. It's not just Venezuela. And also, let me tell you another thing, okay? When Nordic countries want to implement social democracies or socially democratic principles, it doesn't matter because the United States can't impose sanctions on them, and the United States can't go and bomb them. The United States can't implement coups in their countries, and look at that. It freaking works, dude. It works. Maybe we should stop meddling in foreign affairs all around the world and allow these countries to do whatever they want. Because you can virtue signal as much as you want.
I generally agree with a non-interventionalist.
You can talk about virtue signaling. Here's what's virtue signaling. Acting like you care about Venezuela. Acting like you care about the interests of Venezuela.
I do care about Venezuela.
Yeah, if you did, you wouldn't be in support of an administration that is trying to put sanctions on Venezuela, a country that is already crippled. Like, it's a corrupt government. I'm sure there's an authoritarian element to it. I'm not the biggest fan of Maduro either. But you can't sit here and be like, oh, Venezuela, just to talk about socialism when your fellow men and women, your fellow brothers and sisters are dying in this country, and you want to stop socialized medicine from happening here. All right.
So again, so you're drawing a connection with empathy and with my policy prescription to help people. And I would say
because the free market principles have never worked in socialized medicine. Obviously, that's the reason why we're here. Like, that's the reason why. That's the reason why it's 4 times.
Can you explain to me though that why people did everything they could to flee East Germany, to go to West Germany, people flee Havana, Cuba for Miami, Florida, or they flee Venezuela for a free market system?
Why are they coming to America? Every immigrant's like, I'm coming to America for the free market system. Maybe the ones that you found. Like, what are you
they're
talking
also
about?
fleeing.
They're leaving
they're fleeing
violence
the communist
that we
dictatorships.
caused. They're leaving violence that we largely were responsible for, like the Honduran caravan, for example.
Let me ask you a question.
Who is implementing coups in these countries, Charlie? Who is funding right-wing paramilitary groups just because they're capitalist and they love the free market?
So tell me, since that's your general thesis, that the reason communism and socialism hasn't worked because of U.S. intervention, what U.S. intervention in Zimbabwe, or what U.S. intervention? So the distinction between South Korea.
Only reason. I'm not a dummy. I don't think there's a singular reason for an entire country to absolutely fail. Like it's ridiculous.
Let me ask you a question.
Because
South Korea,
you're the only one who's saying
today
that.
Because of U.S. intervention. North Korea lives in darkness.
It's not just because of U.S. intervention, Charlie. There are a multitude of reasons. Obviously,
the fact that socialism is evil, it doesn't work. It has proper incentives.
All of your reasons are just socialism is bad. Like you're literally like, no, it's socialism.
Well, no, and also that free market capitalism is the most proven, moral, and effective economic system ever discovered.
Dude, it's ridiculous.
That's lifted more people out of poverty. That Western civilization is one of the greatest experiments in human history. That the life expectancy has gone nearly double in the last 100 years.
You do realize
that
you keep
global
repeating
poverty
your same talking points, right? Like I understand that technological advancements are inevitable.
Repetition is the soul of memory, and I hope you can remember some of this stuff so you can stop being a Marxist.
Yes. I understand that across the board, due to exponential growth and also due to technological advancements, which were created as an outcome of both publicly and privately funded research all around the world, that we are currently in a better state. I fully understand that, and I fully agree with that. Only one side is arguing that it is all just magical free market principles, and just like only one side here is arguing that an entire nation is crippled because they decided to adopt Marxist principles, when plenty of other countries have are successful social democracies, or at the very least have a robust economy and also more social spending, where citizens are happy and they don't have to be living in fear that their bosses, if they fire them, they're on a whim, that they'll die.
Well, let's bring it back domestically then. Why is it the most murderous, hopeless, and poor cities in America are all run by Democrats?
What does that have to do with anything? Yeah, okay, yeah, they're bad. What do you want me to say? Okay, sure.
Because your very policies are put on trial in Philadelphia and Chicago,
yeah, you know,
and
like Rahm Emanuel, the big socialist, who said
Milwaukee.
Chicago needed socialized medicine, and that's why there's gun violence.
Chicago's already entertaining universal basic income, of which you support. They're entertaining.
So you're saying they premeditatedly are having a lot of violence because they're going to implement universal basic income?
Well, they also have the strictest gun laws in the country, but
one time.
You're a big fan of those too.
Please make a good argument one time.
No,
you can't just say.
Can you answer the question though? Why is it that the most murderous?
Some of those Democrats are bad. What do you want me to say?
Well, maybe the ideas are bad, Hasan. And maybe the ideas don't work.
But what are the ideas? Like, do you
the
really?
The ideas are high
but
tax,
they're not implementing socialist principles. That's
limiting
not
government freedom, not investing, not allowing.
Name one socialist principle that Rahm Emanuel has tried to implement in Chicago.
The strictest gun laws in the country. Let's start with that. The fact that he doesn't allow school choice, the fact that he cracks down on the voucher system in Chicago, the fact that Chicago has the highest property taxes in the country, the fact that Chicago just instituted income tax. These are all quote-unquote progressive ideas. Chicago is more bankrupt.
Are you against
hopeless.
all taxation? Can we just get this out of the way?
No, I think we should have lower taxes. And thanks to Donald Trump, we have the lowest tax rate in 60 years.
Give me a number, because like I never understand this. It's always like, I love deregulation, I love lowering taxes. Like, just making these declarative statements might sound great because the tangible impact of it is not necessarily immediate, especially when it comes to tax cuts. But we see the consequences 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the line, like the erosion of the middle class in America. These are a consequence of Ronald Reagan era tax policies. This is crazy. All of our schools are failing, Charlie.
Because of Democrat alliance.
Oh, Democrats like the ones in Oklahoma, right? That's where many.
So you support school choice, Hasan? By the way, Sweden has school choice.
Yes, absolutely.
So Sweden has school choice.
That's what I want. I don't want to desegregate the schools. I actually don't support school. Like, we're so ridiculous.
School choice is a solution that can allow poor families to go to a better school. As Democrat politicians and teacher unions that are preventing poor families from sending their kids to better schools.
I'm trying to come to a conclusion with you about obvious problems that we have. But you are literally just regurgitating Republican talking points back at me without necessarily listening to anything that I'm saying.
I've said, Hasan?
I say, this is what's going on with our schools.
Disprove one thing I've said.
And then you go, do you hate choice? What does that have to do with what I'm saying?
I asked a question.
All right. let's get. There we go. Yeah. So here, let's do a little lightning round. Jake, you're a socialist. How do you explain why why all these cities with Democrat mayors have some of the highest crime rates in the country?
It's because they enacted their socialist policies, right?
I'm really of two minds about this, because my reaction as I listen to this is pretty much what Hasan is doing. On the one hand, that's like, are you kidding? Like, you think Rahm Emanuel's a socialist? Like, that's, come on. What Rahm Emanuel did actually in Chicago is probably the best single test case refutation of the liberal defense of the Obama administration. It's it was all the Republicans. It's it's Chicago, where the Republican Party essentially doesn't exist, and the guy who was Obama's de facto co-president for the first couple of years was mayor, and he had no particular check at all. He spent his time privatizing things and busting unions, but also let's go what does bother me about this, though, on Hasan's end, is that he's just kind of expressing incomprehension that anybody could think what Charlie thinks, which I think is probably amusing to people in the audience who agree with Hasan, but it doesn't really show anybody who's not already convinced what's wrong with what Charlie is saying.
I don't think you're, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm just wondering about if this is a debate for the average person, right? Who is trying to pick between Republicans and Democrats. Does the average person understand? I mean, maybe they do now because of Bernie Sanders, right? But that the Hasan is in a camp that would critique both Democrats and Republicans, and just because a Democrat did something, that doesn't mean that they instituted socialist policies. In fact, they instituted almost the very opposite, except when it comes to social issues, right? Maybe guns and gay marriage and stuff like that, right? I just don't know if the average person would, or if everyone would already be on that, would already know that.
No, I don't think there would be. I mean, I think that, some people, and I guess the immediate audience in the physical hall, it's Politicon, so they're upset, they're probably pay a lot more attention to this stuff than most people, and so they probably do at least track that. Okay, there's that Bernie Hillary distinction, but even there, right? I mean, I think a lot of people, I don't know. I think a lot of people are not making that distinction very well, and I think by just sort of expressing incredulity and making fun of the idea that anybody could think this, I think Hasan is maybe missing the opportunity a little bit to help to educate people about that distinction. Right, he could, if he was going to engage, instead of just saying, "You think Rahm Emanuel is a socialist? Yeah, what are you, crazy?" Right, you could say, "Well, the left in Chicago hates Rahm Emanuel, and it's mutual," and talk about his confrontations with the Chicago Teachers Union, or talk about the fact that Rahm Emanuel famously got in trouble when he was still the Obama's chief of staff for describing a suggestion that they could go after blue dog Democrats who weren't willing to vote for certain things, by describing that suggestion as fucking retarded, which suggests that he doesn't see himself as particularly aligned with the progressive wing of his party, never mind anything to the left of that, and also you should answer the question, right? Okay, why is it that all of these cities are run by Democrats and have high crime? And the answer is because places where lots of people are concentrated and there's lots of poverty have high crime. and also, it's demographically, I mean, those are going to be places that are more favorable to Democrats. But like, turn it around. What is it specifically that you think that any of these mayors did that is causing the high crime rate, right? Really spell it out. Like, is it, do you think there's high crime rates in Chicago because Rahm Emanuel doesn't love charter schools?
Right.
What's the cause and effect connection between these things supposed to be? I mean, the gun law thing, at least I understand. I mean, it's dumb. You could certainly, because Chicago is not an island. And in fact, literally, the city of Chicago borders on Indiana, which has pretty lax gun laws, and like there's no border check, to see if you have guns in your car, when you go from Indiana. So like, you can like spend 20 minutes and go back. But it's dumb. But at least I understand like what the connection is supposed to be between the gun laws and crimes. Like, oh, see, there aren't enough good guys with guns. And like, that's why there are lots of murders in Chicago, because like all of the less impoverished places with lower crime rates, it's just because it's like a Clint Eastwood movie all the time, every day, right?
If you gave me a gun and sent me Gunsling and Desperado, the two of us could really keep down crime because we're the good guys, But yeah, that seems right. That like we would really clean it all up, but no, I mean it's ridiculous. Like is that what you think? Like that in middle class suburbs of Chicago where there's hardly any crime, that's just because there are like it's like all the time, like somebody is like starting to try to hold up a store, and like somebody else comes out, you feeling lucky, punk, how you feeling? Like, right. Clearly not, right? I mean, it has nothing to do, or very little to do, at least, with what the what the gun laws are, and you can all, like right. It's about the poverty, and like what is it that he thinks causes the poverty, and it's like, I mean, honestly, municipal, I'm not saying that it doesn't matter or that there aren't good things you could do if the left takes over municipal governments. It does, and there are, but like, that has way less effect on like those larger economic conditions than state and federal policies do. I mean, like oftentimes, if anything, this is my problem with some of the rhetoric around defunding police, that oftentimes people with the best of intentions talk about it as if city budgets had this like vast amount of money that you could like transfer over to start hiring a bunch of, counselors and social workers, to answer calls instead of cops. And then like, you could also like, while you're at it, you put a bunch of money in the school system. It's like, no, they like, this is just like pushing around the crumbs that like neoliberalism like have left city governments to play with. I mean, like, I'm not saying don't do it, but like, it's definitely not going to take you very far. Right. I think what I'd be curious to hear about from you, given that you're, going to be debating Charlie, and I'm just kind of like slightly big picture on these debates, right? Is like, it seems like Charlie wins in a way when he's able to, let's say, elide the differences between Democrats and leftists, right? When he's simplifying the issues and giving simple answers, and often in a forum like this, the most simplistic answer, like it's like a punchline debate, right? So I understand why Hasan isn't able to stay calm. Watching this debate is definitely, making my heart
right, for sure.
But, so I don't blame him, but it seems like there's a challenge there when your opponent's offering these, simplistic, jargony answers, right? Like complex issues, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's not an ideal circumstance. There might not be great solutions, but there are certainly better and worse ones. And this is part of what I was saying earlier about trying to like lay down like a consistent narrative that you go back to over the course of the debate, because that way, like, your immediate talking point of the moment is less likely to to get lost, right? So I think that particularly on the question of, depended on the exact flavor of far leftist, somebody is like what they would either call, Stalinism or, actually existing socialism or whatever, right? Like on that question, I think Hasan is probably at his weakest precisely because all he really wants to do here, like all he's really doing is sort of gesturing at complexity, which like fair enough, it's not wrong. These are complex historical situations, but it's not going to play well in an environment like this because it just sounds evasive. Like if all you're saying is it's incredibly complicated, then that sounds like you don't have anything good to say about this, fairly or not. And so I think like really the challenge, and again, it's easy to say this stuff after the fact, much harder to think of it at the moment. But like, that's part of why we do it, right? Like it's good to, in moments of reflection, be able to say, oh yeah, I guess this would have been the better thing to do.
Right.
I think that one thing you can do is try to find something that A is true, right? You're not simplified to the point where you're saying something's wrong, but B is like relatively easy to understand in the moment, like especially for something like this, where it's not like some like Oxford style debate where you have 10 minutes to make an opening statement and you can structure it all or whatever. This is more of a Jerry Springer style debate. Really dated reference. Half the people watching this don't know who that was, but yeah, I think that like one thing that you could say that would be true and would like make sense in the moment is to say, look, a lot of people in some of these, yeah, sure. Not all these countries that you're talking about are exactly the same. Some of them are pretty random, but like I think we can generally say that a lot of the things that people are fleeing are political repression, dictatorship. But I don't advocate that, so I don't know why we're talking about that. And let's go back to the spectrum that I said that, Norway and Sweden and Finland are a lot further along the United States. None of those, nobody's fleeing from Norway, Charlie. Like it's there are no like boats washing up on the shore of England of like Norwegian refugees. So let's talk about Norway. Would you be okay? I mean, go back to what you were talking about earlier with the meme. Would you be okay with us doing that? Yes or no? And if yes, we could go further and talk about more radical stuff. But if no, let's just talk about that, right? Why wouldn't you be okay with that?
Right. I mean, I think, over the years, I've become to appreciate more the effectiveness of like Bernie Sanders, for example, his way of keeping on task, and these I think in the beginning, when I first encountered him, I was like, well, he says a lot of the same stuff over and over again. But over time, I've started to appreciate how, to build this kind of narrative when, not everyone is on the same page, not saying he's perfect and that he doesn't,
No, but he is very good at that. I mean, like, I think that's part of what makes him such an effective political communicator. That I remember, I think this was like an old Michael Brooks slide, like you couldn't have, like Noam Chomsky could never do, right? What Bernie Sanders does, because, he's just going to keep it incredibly simple. And like, yeah, there is an extent to which if you've like been to one Bernie rally, you've been to every Bernie rally, like not entirely, like the set list changes a little bit, but basically like if you're going to see Leonard Skinner, you're going to hear Freebird, right? Like like if you go to a Bernie Sanders rally, you're going to hear about the millionaires and the billionaires and how America is the only major country on earth, that doesn't provide healthcare on a right. And the fact that I can say all that shit from memory is a good thing. And that's part of why he was so effective in getting that message out, because it's like simple, it's obvious why it's right. And he's going to like hammer at it constantly. And that's, so people will actually remember that. That's okay. That's good.
Yeah. On that note, something to watch out for is Charlie actually had a pretty good response when Hasan got him for saying the same things over and over. He said, I have to say it over and over to get it through your head so you'll stop being a socialist. So that's is a good response. I guess, if you have all these canned responses, then you need canned lines. You need a canned response when someone calls you out on it. But I think that's something to look out for.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's go back to it.
I didn't say you hate choice. I said, are you for school choice?
I said, do you hate choice?
School choice.
Okay. Do you hate school choice?
Do you
Sure.
support school choice?
It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous question because you
No,
don't.
it's actually Florida implemented school choice and went from 25th ranked in education to second ranked in education in the country. School choice works and it helps the least
You're
of these,
doing it again.
which I know
You're
you care
literally
about.
like a politician, nonstop with
You
talking
mean
points.
saying facts?
But I
Do
gave
facts
you the
bother
answer.
you, Hasan? Does evidence bother
Like
you?
the wait.
Numbers bother
Everybody,
you?
No. Hold on, Charlie. Let's get back to reality for just a brief moment, okay?
Let's
leave the conservative sphere for a second and get back to reality. You make false assertions nonstop.
Name
like,
one.
for example, the fact that Democratic policies are the reason why Oklahoma's school system has failed when there's literally school in certain districts, there's schools for 4 days. Like, what are you talking about? It's a consequence of underfunding these school systems, and that is inherently anti-socialist. If liberals are doing it, then they're also anti-socialist, and therefore they are wrong as well. And that's something that I want to talk about here. Look, this is why I came in and said, right now, the biggest problem in our country, from my perspective, is the fact that we don't look at socialism as if it's something that could potentially help us, but because of years and years of propaganda, and also very, very talented mouthpieces like Charlie here, and I will admit, he's very good at disseminating conservative agitprop. Okay, because of that, and because of the lack of supposedly inside of our liberal institutions, the lack of education surrounding Marxist theory only at the highest levels, that people genuinely assume that socialism is a bad thing and not necessarily something that can help us, something that can save us. These are popular policies, you guys. You guys are advocating against your own best interests. You're advocating against your own well-being. When you talk about free market principles, you're essentially saying, look, it's fine if private companies can do whatever they want because private corporations are essentially privatizing tyranny, okay? They are unelectable, they are unaccountable, and this mythological free market understanding hasn't saved you at all.
Use some evidence so then we can have a discussion about it.
I mean, look around, dude. I already gave you.
I look around and I see a lot of Trump supporters. Great. Go Trump.
Okay. No, that's great.
I mean,
your example of evidence is the fact that there are Trump supporters in the room at Politicon.
I used
very
evidence.
good.
Okay, so for example, evidence. Chicago has not had a Republican mayor since 1931. Evidence. Atlanta has not had a Republican mayor.
Stop looking at this from partisan perspectives. I don't care about the Democratic Party.
But here's the point: is that your ideas have been put on referendum.
Your failure to see
Hasan,
that I'm not. I also don't like liberals.
I allowed you to get through your diatribe. Allow me to finish.
Actually, that's the perfect transition to the next topic here.
Hey, we have a moderator.
So, couple things here. First of all, I love these guys.
I knew you were here.
First of all, this is one of the most entertaining conversations I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, got to.
Second of all, you guys are very talented because you've.
Yeah, got to give Charlie props for his reaction to the moderator finally talking.
Yeah, if there's something obvious, like if you're a stand-up comedian on stage and there's something obvious and you don't mention it, you're not going to win over the crowd, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And he is doing that well here. I mean, like you can see. I've got to say, like, okay, I still don't know why he thinks Zimbabwe is whatever was socialist. I'd be fascinated to hear that. A lot of what he's saying, makes very little sense if you think about it for very long. But just in terms of controlling the flow of the conversation and sort of knowing, like, this is the time to, like, hone in on the argument, and this is the time to, like, kind of pull back and be like, come on, what are you doing? Right? Like, Charlie is coming across here like he knows what he's doing. I'll just say that. And I also think that one thing, and this is like whatever. I mean, it's like I'm sure you could go back and find places where I've had this problem, but one thing that I think is very obvious that's a problem that Hasan has in this debate is, this might be a little bit of exaggeration, but I read this interview with Christopher Hitchens where he said that you can only have one goal per debate, right? Like there's only one thing that you're trying to do. that's probably an overstatement, but I think it's maybe a useful one, right? Like, and I think that in this case in particular, I think Hasan is sort of shifting back and forth a little bit from, because, like me, like you, he supports the social democratic minimum, the Bernie Sanders platform. And, like me, like you, he has more radical long-term horizons. Fair enough. But I don't think he can quite decide which one he wants to talk about in this debate, or if he's going to talk about both, how he's going to relate them to each other. And so he's he's sort of going back and forth between the, hey, what about, what about Sweden, right? Why can't we do Sweden? And kind of it fell a little bit out of nowhere, where it says he starts talking about corporations being internally repressive and tyrannical, just true enough, but also you can't just say that, right? I remember there's this ancient documentary about Noam Chomsky called Manufacturing Consent, being very old. I remember watching that thing on 2 VHSs. You had to pop the second one in the middle, the first one ran out. And I remember that Chomsky has a good line in there about how he's surprised that people like him aren't invited on TV more often, because when you have 30 seconds to say something, you say something that's really radical, you sound like a lunatic, which is kind of true, right? I mean, if you're going to say something that really challenges people's expectations and sounds counterintuitive to a lot of your listeners, you got to make sure that you're going to be able to explain what you mean.
Mm. Yeah, and that's actually kind of prophetic, right? Because we're seeing maybe a little bit more of platforming left, and maybe in the as a punching bag or as a ridiculous, right? You can figures amongst the left are getting some airtime, for sure. But I mean, I think it's interesting, like you said, if you think of what is their one goal in the debate, what is each of their, what would you say? Hasan said his one goal, I guess, is we have all these problems and people aren't considering socialism because of propaganda, right? So he wants you to at least consider it. I think that's what he said his thesis statement is. I'm less sure on what Charlie his main point is, even though he's kind of coming across he's doing pretty well, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the thesis, I mean, we're 2/3, 3/4 the way in. Maybe not quite that, but certainly a good 60% or something. That seems pretty late to be hearing it for the first time. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was just tell students, I'd really, it doesn't have to be the first sentence, but I'd really like to know by the end of the first paragraph, what you're going to be arguing for. And Charlie, yeah, you're right. I don't think he really has one. I mean, because what would Charlie's thesis statement here be? I don't know, liberals and socialists are both bad and both the same thing.
Right. I mean, he brings a lot more facts out than Trump, for example, but is part of the point just aggression? Part of the point is just a performance of masculine aggression, right? That's a big part of what he's performing, I think, in terms of who comes out the victor to his audience.
I think that's the thing. I mean, I think as a performance, Charlie is doing really well here. As he definitely seems like he's in control of the conversation, and that he's not flustered, that he seems to have all these facts at his fingertip, and et cetera, right? But as an actual attempt to convince anybody of anything, I mean, I don't know. What's the if you started out, you were really open to hearing what Charlie had to say. What's the big thing that you should get out of this? I don't know, actually.
Yeah, it's hard. It doesn't really seem like it would win too many people over. I think as someone who's trying to give him more benefit of the doubt than I ever have before, because he's very difficult to listen to and it's very painful to listen to him for long. I guess it's just more that he has these like weird idiosyncrasies that is like, when the kind of populist right as like these Tucker Carlson types, right, of trying to go for this kind of very limited, strange populism. It's interesting when he carts that out, and I guess that takes the place of like, hey, we're not these ideologues, we have these these little intricacies, but like you said, he never really takes it to his logical extreme. I mean, to what he's really saying, right? But
yeah, I mean, I guess maybe to be more charitable, his. Yeah, what's the actual? Let me see, because I mean the title of the video is just "Debate Hasan Piker versus Charlie Kirk, Politicon 2018." So I'm not sure what the announced topic is, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe maybe Charlie's thesis statement is socialism is terrible, and
free markets are good, socialism is bad.
Yeah,
the more free market, the better.
Yeah,
really good.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's an interest, like there's some obvious tension between the fact that sometimes Charlie talks like a libertarian, but he's supposed to be, but he's also this like huge Trump guy. So of course there has to be some pretension to some kind of populism, and that's very. Like I would like to see that like taken on head on a little bit more, right? I mean, is this just Reaganomics, or is there something special, about, there's something special about this
Reaganomics with Kirkian characteristics, right?
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, if Hasan was able to stay a little more calm, maybe things could have. I don't blame him, but it seems like maybe
no, I don't blame him at all. But yeah, I mean, I also like again, I think that if you're repeatedly asked a question and you just don't answer at all. Like, and I'm not even saying you have to like, it's fine to answer the question by saying like the premise of the question is wrong. That's fine. But like, if it doesn't seem like you're answering, like that never plays well. And like, oh, so are you against school choice or you get school choice? I mean, kind of answer, but you have to be paying attention. I think just, yes, what you call school choice is funneling taxpayer money to private schools, and I'm against that, right? Like, I think that would be like a fairly simple answer that would at least like redirect the question from there's something with the word choice in it. Are you for it or against it? Yes or no? Why aren't you answering?
Yeah, I looked up there was a ranking that had Florida as number 3 on school quality. When I looked up public school quality, it was much lower. But I mean, do you think he has anything? I mean, in his narrative, he was like they instituted more school choice, and then the schools got really, really amazing. If you look at red states versus blue states generally, it doesn't really seem like the pattern is geared toward the more Republican the state, the better a school. So he's very much cherry picking. But I guess he's cherry picking this one Florida example. So I'm a little curious what you make of that.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess despite the fact that I lived in Florida for 6.5 years, I don't know that much about their K-12 school system. But I think that the more like promising way to go about that would just be like, okay, so that's Florida, great. What about the general red state, blue state distinction? Or, if you want to say, well, there's some red states where they're not doing these things that I want, school choice or whatever. Okay, awesome. Let's apply that same thinking to, these cities run by Democrats, that we need to look at the policy specifics and not just say it's Democrats.
Right.
Or if it's, like, okay, great. So Florida is one of the better states in the catastrophe that's the American educational system overall. But like that's like it's like the William F. Buckley's line about Michael Harrington, that he was the most prominent socialist in the United States, which is like being the tallest building in Wichita, Kansas. Yeah, great, right? You won this prestigious competition, that you were one of the better states within this country whose educational system is a disaster. Why don't we look at other countries and see which ones of those seem to have better school systems? And again, like Finland, which is very widely regarded as having one of the very best school systems in the world. Like even a lot of like corporate like ed reform types will point to it for stuff they like, but they have incredibly strong teachers unions and no private schools. So
right.
I think that would be the thing to do, is to say, yeah, you can cherry pick this one example in this like really narrow, misleading way, but like let's talk about the global track record of different kinds of it. Not like what does some state do within the basic framework of this weird system where schools are paid for by like people, the millage in that particular school district. So you have these like insane disparities, between different schools, et cetera, right? Like within that, like which are the states that are like doing better or worse than other places that have the same? But like, no, let's talk about different school systems. And then I think it's going to be much less favorable to what he's saying. But we're getting close to 10, so let's watch a big chunk.
Touched on nearly all the topics I wanted to touch on. Third, you've touched on actually what you ended on here is an interesting theme that actually cuts across the political divide, and that is that young people across the board are extremely skeptical of institutions. They are skeptical of both the Democratic and Republican parties. A plurality of millennials today identify as independent. So I want to get your take on this because I think it has a huge impact on the policy choices we decide. And I heard it from both of you, when you mentioned Democratic policies, Hasan would say that I'm not a Democrat, and I do even criticize a lot of liberal policies, and vice versa. So let me actually start with Hasan on this.
For the record, just before we even get started, I didn't say I'm not a Democrat. I said I criticize Democrats because I'm not a partisan hack. Okay? If someone's policy choices, for example, like school voucher systems and whatnot, are inherently bad from a morality perspective, and I don't appreciate that, I'm going to criticize it. That's all I was saying.
Right, but I
don't have to defend the Democratic Party, and I certainly will not defend the Republican Party. That's all I wanted to point out. I will still probably vote Democrat in the end of the day because I believe in easing the burden placed upon the proletariat, and that is why I will vote Democrat, and I'll tell people to do that as well.
So let me ask.
Did he say the proletariat?
Are you triggered by a word? Like, what do you mean?
So okay, Hasan.
Proletariat, an inherently bad word, guys. It means the working class.
Oh, yeah, I got that. Just ask how that worked out in Stalinist Russia, fighting for the working class.
Only place where there's ever been the proletariat. No one has
like Mao's China or, Vietnam or Cuba or Zimbabwe, all the 100 other times we tried communism in the last 100 years. Bourgeoisie.
That's not what I'm advocating for. Do you understand the difference between Stalinism and Leninism and Marxist theory in general? There are different variations. What you're doing right now is taking advantage of a lack of education surrounding leftist ideology, and it's really disgusting. Instead, sit down and understand what the hell I'm talking about. I don't care about state assertion of power, okay? I don't care about authoritarianism. Obviously, I'm not an authoritarian. I don't like our current almost proto-fascist government right now.
All right.
Wow. Okay. Can I say?
Go ahead.
So here's something, Hasan, just so the audience can distill this. I don't trust the government. Therefore, why make the government bigger? Hasan says he doesn't trust the government, and he wants to make government bigger. He says, "Oh, the government is." This is Hasan. The government is largely bought by lobby.
Literally doing a "This is Hasan" right now. Do you think you sound intelligent?
Can I summarize what you're saying?
Okay, go ahead.
We agreed that lobbyists have too much access to this government. You want to make that government bigger, stronger, more powerful. I want to make that government smaller and more accountable to the citizens. That's a huge difference between conservatives and progressives.
I love that. Look, are we going to have an actual intelligent conversation surrounding this? Because more government doesn't necessarily always mean more bad government. It's not like I'm advocating for corruption here. Actually, as a matter of fact, if you want to talk about corruption, let's talk about lobbying. Let's talk about how money is speech, like how we fund politicians. Let's talk about the fact that politicians spend 70% of their time raising funds for their next campaign. I don't like that system. I advocate against it. You want to reform campaign finance laws and give me specific examples of how you want to do that? Because I don't think Foster Freeze, who's one of your donors, is going to be very happy when he finds out you're talking out of turn.
And I'm sure that the Democrat teacher unions are going to be pretty upset when you start talking about putting caps on Citizens United. Myth number one, that somehow only Republicans and conservatives benefited from Citizens United.
I don't care
the
what
Democrat
they think.
labor
It's
unions
me.
were
I'm
the
talking
biggest
to you right now.
beneficiaries.
There are
from
plenty
Citizens
of libertarians
United.
who feel
Hillary Clinton
the same
outspent
way.
Trump 2-1. So don't give me the idea that somehow
No.
it's only
I know.
Republicans and only. Allow me to finish, Hassan.
You know me,
Hassan,
notoriously not anti-Hillary. You're right.
Charlie, I want to hear your solutions on campaign finance. Yeah.
Let me go back to something you said earlier.
Okay, but like, dude, you can't paint like Democrats do this, Republicans do this. Ask me what my position is, and I will gladly tell you.
I will tell you
I'm
my
giving
position
you that same
on
benefit.
campaign finance reform. No more dark money.
Specifically,
24-hour reporting period, unlimited contributions.
Unlimited contributions?
Yes.
Are you out of your mind?
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. The Young Turks Network.
Yeah.
Would you say that it's more liberal or it's more conservative?
It's absolutely more liberal,
okay,
dude.
so when you talk, you're influencing an election.
You think it's
should that be regulated?
You think us?
Because that could be considered political speech.
No. You think
see where that can get really dangerous?
Think that hold on, let me just understand your line of reasoning here. Do you really think that Pfizer's spending like $500,000 on a campaign so that we don't have to regulate drug prices? That's the same as me, a person who very outspokenly criticizes both parties, talking about it from a leftist perspective with almost zero actual representatives to support. That's the same to you? What an insane
Okay, so every speech has currency, okay?
What an insane
so
analogy. You
all
have to be a
speech,
little
all
bit
speech
more
has
rational.
some form of currency.
You have to have a little.
Whether
you
a
have to
celebrity
exercise
endorses a politician or whether a political action group endorses a candidate. So if your position is that money, let me finish. Allow me to finish. That money is speech, therefore money represents value. All speech must therefore be regulated. That when Lady Gaga
you're
endorses
trying to
Hillary
apply
Clinton,
flat
you must
logic
endorse
to something that is insane.
Please, for the love of God, let me finish a sentence.
But it's insane.
I mean, so 24-hour reporting periods and no more dark money. I think allow transparency. If
you give us 2 bones and then you take away everything with a crazy
corporation
unlimited...
wants to participate in an election, 24-hour reporting periods. Here's where you and I will agree. Why do lobbyists have so much power? Because government is so powerful. The idea that somehow we can grow government and make government better as we grow it, there's zero evidence ever to suggest that. Decentralize government back to the states and back to the people. We have too many federal bureaucracies running our life.
Hold on. Look, I'm asking you because I genuinely want to understand your perspective, okay? So you threw out a statement where you said there's zero evidence that more government is better. What does that mean?
Can you show me one time in the last 50 years when an American government program or agency grew?
Government program agency?
Yes, because we're talking about
but we
America.
live in a capitalist structure.
Can you give me one piece of evidence where an American government program grew and it got more efficient and it did a better job at delivering value to the citizens? One.
Medicare is a pretty good
$80 billion a year in documented Medicare waste.
Wait, so you think 11 million people now being covered? You think the fact that 26...
By the way, here's the thing.
Wait,
we
hold
pay
on.
into Medicare and you get it later, okay? So that welfare, housing, development,
who's got Social Security, dude? Like, we're having this conversation as though we don't live in the same reality. Who's always aching to cut Social Security? Who's always aching to give tax cuts to the wealthy and corporations?
Who's always aching to grow government?
Who's
always aching to spend more money that you don't have? Who's always aching to reverse the Trump tax cuts?
Look, listen.
Right, so, like, look, here.
No. Hold on. Let me finish my point.
Here's the big philosophical difference is that we both don't trust government. Only one of us want to make that government smaller and more accountable to the citizens.
Dude,
that's me.
Not true.
He wants to give more money and more power to the very government that we both don't trust.
I'm the one who wants to make the government accountable. You're the one who benefits from the government being corrupt, because then you can turn around and say, no, we don't need this government to be smaller. So the wealthy benefactor can virtually enact feudalist policies upon the same people who are cheering right now for free market enterprise as though that is going to save them. It is insane to me that people still think that this current broken system that we live under, okay, where wages have remained stagnant for the past 50, 60 years, while productivity has increased, which is, by the way, that's wage exploitation, just for those of you who don't understand that concept, but that everything is totally fine. And then you turn around and you say the stock market's great. Okay, the stock market is great.
But the stock market,
who owns the stock market?
I'll
No.
let you do more
Oh,
numbers,
yeah, because
okay?
I'm making a good point. You have to interrupt. Look, listen.
You
The
interrupted
stock
me at
market. The
least
stock market.
five times
The
already.
stock market. They look. Republicans love talking about the stock market. You mentioned it in your introduction. The stock market is doing well. Consumer confidence is up. Okay, dude. Well, the 84% of the stock market is owned by the top 10% of wealth. Like, when the stock market is doing well, it's not doing well for you. It's just doing well for those guys. But you can be certain that when the stock market is not doing well, it won't be good for you. Absolutely not. No, sir. Because everything is taken away from the workers. We talk about like, people always come up to me and tell me, hey, Hasan, why do you want to take away my earnings? And I tell them, I'm not trying to take away your earnings. I'm trying to make sure your bosses give back what is rightfully yours. These are your earnings. You work for them, okay? And it is very obvious that corporations are not magnanimously going to, anytime soon, give you back those wages. So we have to implement regulation. We have to implement certain policies. This could be UBI. I don't really like it that much, but this could potentially be taxes on the wealthy and corporations. Like, there are many different ways to do it. Or this could be regulating the wages in some way, or allowing unions to exist in countries. I can't believe you're booing this, man. Your father has been, look, your parents have benefited from this. Your parents have benefited from this.
Charlie's going to come in now.
So first of all, if you want some more numbers, Hispanic median income is at $50,000 right now a year, which is the highest it's ever been in American history under President Donald Trump. Wages have gone up 3.8% in the last 18 months. Hispanic unemployment is the lowest it's ever been. Black unemployment.
In the last what month? 3 months?
Hassan, for the love of God, allow me to finish, okay?
No, 3 months. That's a ridiculous point. That's a ridiculous reference point, Charlie.
Okay,
That's
what?
The point.
The lowest
I
ever
gave
black
you
unemployment
60
rate.
years. I gave you a 60-year window, and you said the last 3 months have been 3% better. Crazy.
3.8% wage growth. $50,000 annual median income for Hispanic family, which is the highest it's ever been in American history. 3.9 million people have gone off food stamps under this administration, 18 months, which is something that everybody should applaud.
I love
entered the workforce. We have more job openings than we have people to fill those jobs right now. 3.7% unemployment rate.
Which is why
4.2%
we should open our borders.
GDP
Thank
grade.
you.
Large average tax cut for
Which is
Americans
why we
citizen
should
at $2,800 a year.
Obviously, there's more jobs available than people taking them, so we should bring in more immigrants, right?
Here's the big philosophical difference and problem, is that Hasan says, well, I don't want to take your worker earnings away. I want to go after your employer, essentially to make sure. I don't have the right to tell anybody what to do with any of their money. That's the big difference, Hasan, is that you're trying to
It's their money, Charlie. It's the workers' money. They are just taking away and accumulating the profits for themselves. I'm not, by the way, I'm not even saying abolish all profits.
Distinctly Marxist argument, by the way.
Just because it's Marxist doesn't mean it's a bad idea. Stop being an idiot, dude. God damn it. Like.
Okay, so I'm so glad.
All right. Yeah, no natural stopping points in this one, but you know we got to 10 minutes till the end, so let's stop there. I think that this is so one thing is I would not, and again I understand it's things can come out in different ways that that you might think they should when you think about it later, but proletariat would not have been my word choice. When he was talking about voting and he went to ease the burden on the proletariat, I think you got to think about who your audience is and who you're trying to convince and what what's going to sound natural.
Also, wasn't the sentence "I vote Democrat to ease the burden on the proletariat"? I want that on a shirt. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that kind of. I don't necessarily disagree with the underlying thought, but man, that sounds like the kind of sentence that Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro or Glenn Beck would think that socialists were saying all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
The proletariat,
yeah, that's a big Hillary talking point for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and it's fine. Like, I'm friendly to the harm reduction thing, but just say, like, for God's sake, like, just say, like, Republicans are doing things that's gonna make life harder for working people, right? Like that way you don't have the immediate like, what the hell did he just say?
Right. Plays well to his audience, I suppose, but not exactly. But were there any other things that stuck out to you in that big chunk?
I think the biggest thing was when Charlie started talking about the size of government and corruption, and I think that this is a place again where like this little mini debate, this chug, he has a really clear narrative, right? Like if you want to summarize what Charlie is saying, it's easy, right? That the reason that corruption happens is that government is too big. The solution to it is to make it smaller. And at one point he said decentralize. And the problem is that I don't think I could really give like a 1-sentence or 2-sentence summary of what Hasan said, because he kind of said a bunch of stuff in response to that, but I don't really know what his, like, I mean, I do kind of, because I know what his politics are, but like from this debate, I don't really know what his narrative is on that.
Right. I think also what he's not really getting into, and I know it might be difficult to get into, is just like the large chasm of thought on government power in socialist thought, right? And that's so divided based on what school of socialist or leftist you are, and he doesn't really get into that. But if you don't get into that, I think he should clarify what he is, and I think that he should have a clear answer on how he wants to increase government spending in some ways, but also I'm sure his politics are fairly I'm guessing he's not Stalinist or whatever. So he maybe it would be good to delineate really.
Yeah, not only was he not Stalinist, but I mean he could say like I want to really curb like surveillance. I don't remember when Trump said that he would torture terrorist families. Right, I think that is an amount of power that no government should be trusted with. Like these are all obviously respects in which he doesn't want the government to be bigger. The respects in which he does want it to be bigger are, he wants to decommodify healthcare and higher education and et cetera, and have more labor protections and all that stuff. But then I think one place to take it is, well, hold on, but why is it that you think any of the ways in which I want government to be bigger are going to lead to more corruption or more corporate influence, like be really specific. And also like when he says decentralization is going to like reduce corruption, it's like, what are you talking about? Like that could not be further from the truth. I mean, like decentralization, if anything, is going to increase corruption. I mean, like some of the most like blatant weird corruption that goes on is like in school districts, because like you have people who are just off in some little corner that not a lot of people are tracking, but where like the money in the district is being concentrated, just like robbing the place blind. So I like that. Silver Harlow says the short summary of Hasan's reply should have been, you make a good case for reform and transparency in government, but not for dismantling the way it protects us. Absolutely. Also, like this idea that decreasing the size of government, I understand the picture, which is, the less government is doing, the less there is for people to like bribe, people to do differently. But that doesn't actually make sense, because the things that Hasan wants are like, hey, let's make, let's join all those other major countries that Bernie Sanders is talking about and make healthcare a right. Let's make, higher education a right. And there's actually much less scope for corruption when things are taken outside of the purview of bureaucrats who can like gatekeep, who's allowed access to a program and who's not. And it's just like, everybody is automatically entitled to this, just by just by virtue of being a person. You don't have to jump through any hoops. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. There's nobody that you have to like slip the money to, to make sure, that they approve your case.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, you just get it automatically. So I think any of these answers would have been fine, but the problem is like it just wasn't clear what his answer was.
Right, and I would hope that there'd be a way to say that to the audience, like, hey, Charlie's trying to flatten these issues into these very, very simplistic terms, right? And that more government is bad equals more corruption, right? These are complex issues, that we can't fully unpack them, but that here's what here are the outcomes I want, right? And socialism is my way of getting there, right? Not necessarily big government, small. It's kind of I feel like it's kind of having the debate on his terms when you let him do that.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. The problem, like, I think the thing is, if you're going to pivot, like, you have to pick one thing to pivot to, and not just do this kind of scattershot thing that, like, and I think it would even be totally fine to say he's flattening a lot of different things here. It's more complicated than that, but you can't just say that and then go on to your next semi-related talking point and then your next semi-related talking point. I think you have to say he's really flattening out the issues here. It's more complicated than that because, right?
Agreed.
And then like relatively clear and specific.
Agreed, 100%. Yeah, I'm sure it's a challenge to figure out exactly into what level of detail to go to, especially in a live.
No, for sure.
I agree. No, I agree. Yeah, that if he could, it's hard for complexity to win a debate, but
no, especially a debate that's that where like the moderator like shows up like 5 times like throughout the entire thing.
Yeah, I like how every time he shows up, he acts like he's been there all along. Like it's not. Like,
yeah, he just acts as if it's like, oh, that's great. So that's the next thing I want to talk about.
That brings us to our next point beautifully. But anyway,
it's like, hold on, like you had no input in anything that's happened for the last 45 minutes, and now you're gonna be like, oh yeah, that was the next thing I was going to ask you about. It's like, no, you asked literally one thing at the beginning, and since then it's just them talking. So yeah, if you don't have a moderator and you want to like win one of those, you let me talk, no, let you let me talk wars. Like you gotta have like something that's like pretty clear and pretty on topic, so you have some payoff. Like, oh, here's what I was getting to. But also the thing about efficiency, which is a different point actually from the corruption one, but whatever. Like the thing about efficiency, like Hasan did say the right thing at first, right? Which is when he started talking about Medicare. But then when Charlie said, "Oh, here's this random factoid that I have memorized about the some impressively high sounding number, for Medicare waste," it's like, okay, but the question is how this compares to the private insurance companies, right? And the publicly run insurance companies in the United States, Medicare and Medicaid, actually have way less bureaucratic overhead than the private ones, which makes perfect sense because you don't have to have like people who are in charge of your marketing plan and how you're gonna edge out all your competitors, and you don't have this whole layer of people who are hired to in quite the same way to like come up with reasons to deny claims, and so actually, in fact, I mean, this is sometimes in 2016 and 2020, this is sometimes brought up as an anti-Medicare for all talking point that you were going to like put all these administrators, people who worked for health insurance companies out of work, which is silly, right? Because you're not actually talking about that many people in the greater scheme of things, and every Medicare for all proposal had some kind of like something built in to retrain them. But also like the talking point just conceded that, yeah, there is all this unnecessary bureaucracy that you get with private health insurance that you actually don't get if everybody's on one great big giant plan and there's no profit, like there's no middleman taking his cut, and you could just have the thing that like people like in the UK will describe. It's like the best thing about the NHS is that I never have to have a conversation about healthcare with anybody but my doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just transition for healthcare middlemen, right?
Yeah. It's like the Helen Lovejoy. Won't anybody please think of the children? For like bureaucrats who work for Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Yeah, exactly. So did you want to get to the end?
No. Let's
Yeah.
Glad you mentioned that. So
it's so silly. Like as if we implement socialized medicine like Venezuela.
I didn't say it was bad. I said it was Marxist, and now I'm going to tell you why it's bad.
Oh, okay.
The problem with the Marxist argument is the incentive structure. In a free market system, incentives, everybody is incentive to create value, get a job, or take a risk and employ people. Under a Marxist socialist system, you're incentivized to either run for political office, get as much power as you possibly can, to try to extract money away from people that don't have it.
What about cooperatives? Like, I don't understand. There's multiple different ways to do this.
Do that voluntarily. Go do what the Amish do. Go live in northern New York. In America, we have people that live in cooperatives today. Don't tell me how to live my life. You can live your life however you want to.
It's just,
the big difference and distinction is that it's impossible to live as a capitalist in a socialist country. You can live as a socialist in a capitalist country.
It's impossible to have capitalism without socialism. You could never.
How's that?
You could never implement capitalism without public roads, without the infrastructure necessary to bring private industry. What the hell are you talking about? You can live in a socialist country. It won't be great. If it's a fully socialist country, I don't think we've been able to figure that out yet. So I'm not even saying that a fully socialist country will be great. But you have never, ever lived in a fully capitalist country.
You pay tolls.
So that's it. That's a
user fee. That's not socialism. That's if you use the highway, you pay for the highway.
Highways are
you
not
pay a gas tax.
Okay,
you pay a gas tax. So if you drive a car, you pay into the highway fund.
Yeah, you're right.
That's how it works, Hasan.
You're right. Socialism is just what you want it to be, and not what it actually is. You're right. Never mind.
Program that will not benefit you. To send the money to someone else.
If something is paid for with taxes, it's not socialist.
Free market capitalism is the greatest wealth-creating engine in human history. It's lifted more people out of poverty, and you are the beneficiary of the very system that you are bashing right now.
No, because it's not free market capitalism. It's so stupid. When the last time we had free market capitalism or something close to it was leading up to the Great Depression, okay? There's no such thing as like we have a fully free market. Where is the fully free market? If you like a decentralized government, why don't you go live in Somalia? There's decentralized government there, all you want.
Well, so we are more capitalist than we are socialist right now. And everywhere the free market...
Oh, so you admit that capitalism and socialism coexist. So Thank you for proving my earlier point.
Hasan,
you were like,
yes, we have some we have broken public schools, which you would attribute to socialist policies. We spend money that we don't have.
We need to spend
Government
more
is far
on
too big, far too powerful, far too controlling over our lives.
Dude,
we have a $4.4 trillion budget every single year.
It's an idea. It's an ideology.
We have 3 million people that work for the federal government. All of these are pseudo-socialist ideas, of which I categorically disagree with.
So you want to privatize the school system entirely?
Okay, localize the school
answer
system.
My question.
Eliminate
answer
the Department
my
of
question.
Education.
Don't
send the money
run
back
away.
to the states.
Do you want to privatize the school system?
Right, one at a time.
By the way, what does Foster Friess think about all that? I would like to know his perspective because obviously his perspective is more important.
Just for you that don't know, he's trying to attack my investors and donors, of which I'm happy to talk about. We have 35,000 donors spanned in all 50 states. We now have a $15 million budget. And we are supported by some of the most successful people in the American business community.
He means wealthy billionaires who have stolen your money and your
wealth
wages.
For everyone. Oh, really? So when we get investments from people that, for example, helped create the modern internet as we know it, or people that helped.
Oh, how was the modern internet created? Oh, wait, that was also socialism. That was actually military finance.
So let me ask
you a question. There you go. And another example of how publicly funded research is good, and we all benefit from it.
The most successful Silicon Valley companies right now are all socialist. Is that what you're saying? Google,
no,
Apple,
absolutely not.
Facebook. Oh, okay.
So did the most successful Silicon Valley companies invent the
technology
internet?
sector?
Come on,
we
that's not what I said at all. That's not what I said at all.
No, hold on. How about internet providers? You just said internet providers.
No, I said ISPs need socialism so that there's an infrastructure set in place so that they can come and build
their... Of which they pay for every single year.
Okay, so exactly. That's socialism.
Yes, but in order for them to operate, they have to pay into it.
This is so silly.
So we're talking about two different definitions.
No, we're not. There's one real definition that I'm trying to describe to you, and then there's another one where you're just like making up and picking and choosing whatever is capitalist because it benefits your talking point, and then claiming that
Western civilization was created by free market capitalism.
More government. I'm trying to explain this concept to you, but you refuse to understand. But I don't think it's because you can't understand it. I think it's because you refuse to understand because it doesn't fit your narrative.
My narrative's about freedom. My narrative's that America's the greatest country ever to exist, and I want to expand freedom and opportunity for all people. My narrative is that
there is no freedom in a country.
The narrative I care is that we have global poverty at the all-time low.
That is privatized tyranny, Charlie. There is no freedom in a country that is privatized tyranny, where your bosses can do whatever they want and never even give you an example, and never even give you a reason.
I'm not arguing
for
anything in the same galaxy as what you're describing, first and foremost.
You just said I'm arguing for freedom. I'm telling you that progress is important.
Let's
progress
walk through.
towards
in a capitalist
liberty
system,
needs to happen.
That means you have private property rights, which mean if somebody is exploiting you, you go to a judge and you adjudicate that differences. That is inherent in a free market system. You're arguing some sort of
is that the only thing that happens?
Abstract anarcho-capitalism.
What happens when there are natural barriers of entry and the government obviously has to step in and subsidize? What happens? Like we have socialism,
like affirmative action policies.
We only have socialism for the wealthy, and we have some socialism for the very poor.
Okay.
What we need to do is bring that back and have socialism for everyone. For example, Medicare for all would be a good place to start.
Okay. So
there is no answer you can give me to what will happen when automation wipes out the labor force with artificial intelligence. Socialism, whether you like it or not, some variation of that already exists in our country, but some variation of that that will make you deeply uncomfortable will inevitably happen. So it's really silly. You can yell about the free market and how great it is, and also the free market's great because my dad is wealthy is not an argument that you can make anymore, okay? There are people that are suffering in this country.
So Hasan, why don't you give 95% of your money and go to comedy?
Do you really think that will work? Do you really think that will work?
Go
this is
live
silly.
Look, because every single
this is as silly.
You talk uninterrupted for 5 minutes. Hasan, let me finish.
Go ahead. Sorry, you're right.
I live what I practice. I'm a free market capitalist. I employ people. I took a risk. I have my own startup business. Every single day, I practice what I preach. He wants other people to contribute to what he considers to be a good idea, what he considers will make the world a better place. That you have the freedom to go live as a socialist. Go do it, Hasan. What's stopping you?
Okay. Right. So here's why this is ridiculous. And the last point I will make is this. Here's why that conversation is absolutely preposterous. If I gave away the measly earnings that I had and gave away 95% of
how much do you make,
that wouldn't necessarily even push the needle. I will be very honest. It's really embarrassing, especially because my boss is sitting right there. I make $60,000 a year, okay? And that's a really good salary, but it's not like what Ted Cruz's wife was talking about the other day when she said $174,000 salary a year. It's not like we're going to buy a second home anytime soon. But that's the point, okay? You're attacking me, which is ridiculous. Like, asking me what my salary is. Sure, I'll reveal it willingly.
You brought it up in context. I'm asking, why don't you live like a socialist?
Okay.
Go live like a socialist.
The point is larger than that, Charlie.
I live like a capitalist every single day, Cenk. I live as a capitalist.
Hey,
I live what I believe.
No.
What do I do? I get charity every single year.
Hold on.
What's my salary?
Hold on.
Less than it.
Charlie,
take a seat. Cenk, let's go.
Charlie,
what are you doing?
Take a seat. Take a seat.
Psycho?
All right, no. Take a seat. You're going to take a seat. You're going to take a seat over here.
Oh, my God.
What's my salary?
All right.
Oh, ridiculous. All right, behave, everyone. Jesus Christ.
Okay.
I practice what I preach.
Charlie.
You do not practice what you preach.
Charlie.
All right, hold on. Last point.
You don't want to give him the attention here.
Everyone,
35,000 donors across the country.
Last point.
We are funded by the grassroots of this country. You can try to demagogue it all you want.
Okay. Can I finish my point?
All right.
Less than Hasan. So
hold on.
Charlie.
Let me finish my point. All right. Right? We're having a reasonable discussion, right? We're here. We're talking to one another. Let's stop screaming at one another, including those of the Young Turks who obviously don't pay me enough. So, so here's what I was trying to say. Okay. We like to make ourselves feel comfortable by implementing certain environmental policies. For example, like the straw ban in California, which is largely ridiculous because it lowers 0.006% of the plastic in the ocean. This is just simply to make ourselves feel comfortable when 100 companies are responsible for 71% of the carbon emissions. Like, it's ridiculous to think that we are going to have any sort of positive change if I go out and I live in a upstate New York collective. Obviously, I'm fighting so that everyone can at least see that I'm coming at this not from a partisan place, not from a partisan place at all, but from a place where I'm looking at our problems in this country and trying to find solutions that will help every single American.
Okay, perfect. So we have to wrap it up now, but I want to say a couple things. First of all, I'm really grateful to both of you. What we're seeing right here is except for that last part, is American democracy at work. This is about a competition of ideas. And since the founding of this country, this is really what it was all about. What's the role of government and what's the role of free enterprise? And so I just want to thank both of you for having a constructive and lively debate. Give both of them a big round of applause.
God bless America.
Thank you.
And God bless Donald Trump.
Yeah, no, he had to get in that last word, literally the last few seconds there. Get that in. God bless Donald Trump. Yes, Andy, you should absolutely come to Arizona with me and yell. I think it's just a studio. I don't think there's really going to be an audience live, but you should go into the studio with us to yell how much do you make a year. So that would definitely spice things up. That got. I said earlier that this was less of an Oxford-style debate than a Jerry Springer-style debate, and man, they really lived up to that in the last couple of minutes.
Yeah, and I do get the Jerry Springer reference, but it really lived up to it.
I mean, that was like bordering on like Jed throwing a cherry from the
it was really, I mean, I remember seeing the Donald Trump to wrestling combinations, and so I remember reading an interesting article about how Trump really learned his modern oratory style from his appearances, right, on wrestling programs, and I'm sure Charlie is. I wouldn't be surprised if he was following in his footsteps. It was fun in terms of the video being dated. Hasan making $60,000 a year and talking about buying a second house, that was pretty funny. But I wonder what he would say now. But that was just the Easter egg.
Which is funny. I will say I was actually, defending his honor to somebody on social media earlier tonight because they brought up the $3 million house. I was like, yeah, whatever. It's fine. I obviously want to tax a lot of that. But if he, if he can undo the rules of the current game, if he can make a lot of money without busting any unions or committing any war crimes, more power to him. Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Yeah. He would have been more susceptible to those attacks. I'm not sure of saying.
Definitely, it would sting a little bit now, that he's making, enough more than $60,000 a year that he got the house.
Yeah. Well, so what did you make of the end and the kind of devolving into shouting and screaming?
So just before it devolved into shouting at the end.
That was really funny. I know it's bad, but it was really I was laughing.
No, it was very funny. But yeah, just before that, I would love the camera from the other angle to show how that started. If it really was Jack just randomly standing up and doing that. But yeah, just before that, Charlie was making a pretty standard libertarian kind of talking point. That this is something that you get from let's put it this way. This is not just something you get from the Charlie Kirks of the world, right? You get it from Jason Brennan as a right-wing libertarian philosopher. Has got a book called Why Not Capitalism. He really emphasizes this argument there, which is, you can have if you want society to operate in a different way, then hey, we got a free market. Nobody's going to stop you. Retreat into the woods and have your little proto-socialist commune in miniature, which is I don't think a great argument, and I actually do think that like some of the things that Hasan said in response to that, like we've established, we don't have to keep beating this point in the ground. This is like early rusty 2018 Hasan, but like I actually do think some of the things that he said in response to that were like reasonable responses. Like, hey, you want to you want to go somewhere with with much less government. That exists too. But I think that I think this is another one where there wasn't really like a well-defined, clear response just to that, which I think you do. I think you do have to have, right? I mean, like, why isn't that sufficient just to say that, hey, if you and your buddies could scrape together enough money, you can like prefigure the society that you want to live in like a commune or cooperative or whatever, and why isn't that good enough? Or doesn't this show that like capitalism is a very tolerant system? Because you can have socialism within capitalism, but you can't have whatever. And like the way this talking point always goes, like but you authoritarian socialists wouldn't let us have our little islands of capitalism within a future socialist system. And I think that does sound compelling to some people, and I think that the response that Hasan was going for at the end, and I mean this goes back to the point about sort of toggling in between just saying like sort of normie social democratic things that might sound plausible, and like really wanting to talk about like Marxist exploitation theory or how capitalist firms are internally totalitarian or whatever. I think like the thing that was the most direct response to that point that Hasan made was, oh well, capitalism relies on bits and pieces of socialism, which I don't think is a particularly useful way to use the words capitalism and socialism, but whatever. It's fine. I know what he means. And I guess to be fair, I also think this is a place where Charlie's response really broke down, because he said like, this is the point where I unmuted myself and like talked over it for a second because I couldn't, I was like Jake jumping up in his chair, right? Couldn't help. Yeah. But because he said, like, Charlie said something really weird when he was saying like he was defending why like highways are properly capitalist institutions. And he was like, well, do you pay tolls? See, that's not socialist. That's, pay for use. And you pay the gas tax that goes to the highway fund. And it's like, okay, one, not all highways are tolled. That's just a weird thing to say to start with, right? Like, most are not, right? But then the other thing, like, especially with the second half, the gas tax, like, so wait a second, now something is capitalist and not socialist paid for by taxation?
Right. That was a very confusing point. I don't even know why he brought it up, and he used it as a gotcha. Like, you pay tolls, don't you? Like, admit it. So it was really strange. I mean, I think, if you don't set the terms of these debates, I mean, I remember seeing one of those like Ben Shapiro destroys a college student videos where the guy was trying to talk about like, cooperatives in Spain or something. And he's like, well, are there free markets? And the guy's like, or are there markets? Sorry, are there markets? And the kid was like, yes, there are. He's like, okay, then it's not socialism. And like everyone clapped, you know what I mean? So like with the existence of market socialism not being even, on anybody's radar.
Well, but then it's like, which is it, right? If you want to be a socialist, you could like, go out into the woods and start your own, Amish commune. Or is it, if there are markets, it's not socialism? Because like that Amish commune would still exist within a market.
Right.
For all sorts of things.
Right. But when it's not even clear, like what is, again, not to go too far back to the definitions, but it's especially at the end, I think, was really devolving into no one really, they're not really getting traction with using the same set of.
Yeah, because mostly Charlie was using socialism to mean like anything the government does. And like, so he was mostly being consistent about that. It got weird at the end with the highways. But like, that's for like 90% of the debate, that's what he meant. And but then like Hasan, I think it was much less clear. Like the thing that he said, like a lot of times he seemed to be using anything the government does as the definition of socialism. Like when he said capitalism can't exist without socialism. And, you know, when he talked about the military and whatever. And like, again, some of these I know what he means, but like, I think that what somebody who's just coming into this with no prior exposure to him would get out of that is, oh, so you mean the same thing it does. It's like anything the government is doing. But then like he brought out cooperatives and it just wasn't obvious how it fit. Like I think it would have been way better to like front load, like here I'm going to use the word socialism in this debate, and you know, which you could do in lots of ways. And I'm not, you know, I'm not super committed to like arguing about exactly what the best, you know, way to use words is, especially in a context like this where like you probably have to be a little bit looser than using in other contexts because like you don't have time to like do like a little seminar on like, you know, on how to divide up all the concepts. But what he was saying at the beginning about the spectrum and the Nordics being further along in the spectrum, okay, sure, you know, that could work, you know, if he'd like really stuck with it. The thing about cooperatives, I think like 45 minutes into the debate is too late to bring that up for the first time because that just, it's just not going to be obvious to anybody listening how it relates,
right,
you know, to what you're saying.
Right. Well, the thread of the debate seemed to be, what are the outcomes that happen when there's socialism? What are the outcomes that happen when there's capitalism, right? And I know Hasan was trying to, and, you know, I'm very familiar with it as an organizer, into the, you know, boss tyranny type of thing. He was trying to describe, like, for example, the lack of just cause. He didn't even get to finish that statement. Remember, he kind of trailed off when he was talking about how you could be fired for any reason. So that's more of an experiential argument of living under capitalism or living under socialism. And I think he really wanted to get there, but it was, to your point earlier of having one point, that's a very different thread, right? And if you're not really familiar with that thread, because you know, compared to someone like Bernie, like a progressive like Bernie, wouldn't Bernie be kind of like more like a worker, as like dignity of work type of guy, right? Well, Hasan was trying to describe work as just like terrible, right? And most people don't necessarily experience work like that. So like you said earlier, maybe he needed to, it was hard to just kind of bring that stuff in, like how bad it
was. Yeah. I mean, if he'd been talking like, I mean, I think this is kind of where he seemed to be starting to go when he talked about exploitation without defining it at the beginning. But like, I think that there would be a way to do this that like some of what you're bringing up might be reasons to think that like it wouldn't have been like the best strategy, but at least it would have been a consistent strategy would be to just push the like workplace authoritarianism thread the entire time, right? You know, say like what I mean by socialism is having a society where workers get to you know, are in control of the workplace, and they get to decide what gets made and how it's made and who does what tasks and how you divide up the proceeds at the end. And I object to capitalism, you know, because, you know, the way it works, you know, talk about workplace authoritarianism. And then when you start talking about cooperatives later, it makes sense, right? Like it fits with what you said, but like, because he's talking about social democracy and he doesn't seem to really, he seems very ambivalent about the like capital C communist countries. It's a little hard to tell like what he has to say about them. There's a point like pretty late in the debate where he sort of offhandedly conceded like, I don't know, fully socialist, maybe we haven't figured out how to do that yet. It's like, okay, well that's pretty big, right? I mean, like if that's your position, like I would put that in the first minute of the debate, not 45 minutes in.
Yeah, Charlie had one of those grins that really fill you with rage when he said that. I think he was, you know, those little smiles that he was doing, but you know, but
yeah, because I think that would have been, you know, because like if he'd said that, again, not my position, right? But if he had said that his position was like in the first like minute of the debate, instead of just like throwing out the thing about exploitation, if he'd said that, then I don't think we'd figured out how to do full socialism. But I think the closer we get to socialism, the better off we are. Nordics, whatever. Again, that is a position that would be to the right of me, but like I would like, it's a very easy position to understand. There were several things that he said at different points that kind of made it, well, that definitely made it sound like it was position, right?
Right.
We sort of had to figure that out very slowly over the course of the debate, and it was confusing because he was also saying some very radical and Marxist sounding things. And so if he'd said that all along, right, then that wouldn't have been like that little smile from Charlie, because like, no, that's just his position and he's going to like defend it, and you just argue about like social democracy. But because it was so unclear for most of the debate, it's like, is he arguing for some form of full socialism? Is he only arguing for social democracy? Is he maybe even arguing that like the capital C communist states are, you know, like that the only big problem was U.S. intervention? Like these are all very different positions. And it, you know, again, it would be good to make it clear from early on, like which one he was going to say. But that'd be my big like strategy, like critique of what 2018 Hasan, you know, did. You know,
he'd probably share a lot of those. But yeah,
I'm sure he would.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't. I mean, look, the first, other than a couple of things with like randos on YouTube, where like some of them would like, you know, have the little like avatar instead of their face, you know, on YouTube. Like, other than a couple of debates with people like that, the first debate that I ever did a couple of years ago was with Dave Smith on the Part of the Problem podcast. And I would say it's like, it's really a mercy that Part of the Problem is paywalled after a couple of weeks, you know, so like, watch that thing anymore, because I definitely, you know, whatever I might do well or do badly now, right? You know, I definitely did everything worse when that debate happened in like early 2019. So, you know, so fair enough. But I mean, I think that you got to do that. And then I think you just have to consider your, like, who is it that you're trying to convince, right? I mean, who's like and like whatever, lots of different people, kinds of people are watching you, but like, I think you have to have some idea of like who's your like ideal audience member that you think that you could reach, and then like what's going to reach them. And probably what's going to reach them is not just sort of like dropping Marxist vocabulary words in, you know, like without really front loading like what they even mean. You know, like don't say don't say you know, I'm gonna vote Democrat because it eases the burden on the proletariat.
I'm glad he said that, because it's pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, I think going forward with your debate, I mean, I guess it's gonna, you know, you're gonna be deciding of what audience, you know, you're trying to reach. You know, I assume it's not just like fans of your program, right? Like,
yeah, right. I mean, there's no point to that. I mean, maybe a little bit of point. It's
yeah.
But that's not the primary point. Like obviously, you know, I think there is actually some value in just getting to see, like, you know, your point of view articulated well, and you get some satisfaction from that, whatever. I don't want to denigrate that, but like, that's not the primary point. I mean, the primary point is to say, hey, this guy has a massive audience, and at least some of those people have never heard these ideas before, and how do I present them in a way that makes them sound at least somewhat plausible, or maybe plants a few seeds in, you know. And I mean, when you say that, like, a lot of people, like, there are a lot of people on the left who have these sort of anti-debate or even kind of anti-argument views, like, oh, there's no point because people are just going to believe what they're going to believe, all that stuff. But it's like, no, tons of different people watch something like this. They're all coming from different places, and some of them, like a minority maybe, but some of them, you're going to catch them at the right time when they are at least somewhat open to it. It's probably not going to be his most hardcore fans, but there are going to be people who are like that. People who are, I don't know, people who are Kirk curious, but like aren't like totally invested in Kirkism at this point. And if you say something that sounds like a good point to them, or even like it might be very like, lots of times I'm sure in the past when I think back to it, when I've heard people make good arguments for positions I don't like or didn't like at the time, my first reaction is just like irritation. But later on, like, some time passes, you find yourself thinking back to it, and you're just like, oh yeah, that actually was kind of a good point, wasn't it? Right? And you want to have some of those. And I think that you're least likely to have those when you're just sort of dropping people into the middle of your worldview without much explanation, or you're just sort of making fun of the other person for the fact that, I'm not saying that mockery can't play some role in this process, but like, but if like you're just sort of making fun of them because like the things that seem obvious to you don't seem obvious to them, like that's probably not going to have that much effect.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've changed my life changed my mind over the course of my life. So most people have, and probably the media figures that they've watched make points probably has something to do with that, right? Like most people can track that experience. So to say that, it's impossible, at least it doesn't ring true to me,
No, and like nobody, like that's so weird because it's like, no, everybody changed their mind, right? Like, I mean, whatever, people heard me say some variation of this before, but like I always just think like too, especially sometimes like when I actually know the person who's saying it and they're like, oh, nobody ever really changes their mind because of arguments. Like, really? Like, because I know you and you were, raised in a right-wing evangelical household, and like you became an atheist, when you were a teenager because you were watching Richard Dawkins videos on YouTube, and you were like a regular MSNBC Democrat until Bernie ran for president the first time, and now you're like halfway to Maoism, and you're going to tell me that nobody changed their mind because of arguments? Like, come on.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, people definitely, people definitely do. And not necessarily in like a road to Damascus way that like, oh yeah, that's that thing that Hasan said at that debate with Charlie Kirk, like my eyes are open now, right? And
yeah, when he said, "Come on, dude, what are you talking about?" I didn't. Maybe some people, but I guess so.
Right.
Yeah.
Like even somebody who did much better than the 2018 version of Hasan, like I don't think that's typically how it works. I think that's a cumulative process that like, you hear something, you hear somebody make a point, and you're not quite sure how to accommodate it because it seems like kind of a good point, but it doesn't really fit within the structure of your beliefs. And then later on, you encounter something else and you have a conversation with a third person. And like over the course of a lot of stuff like this, right? Like, you start to change your mind. I think that's much more typically how it works. That the question is just how you can make a good contribution to it. But we should probably wrap up. We are getting pretty close to 11. So did you feel like you got anything out of this?
Yeah, I did actually, and I mean, I had a lot of fun first of all, but also listening to Charlie talk for as long as he did. I think it helps to definitely understand the right more than normally I would want to engage. And there's some points that I can't really say he won me over or anything, but there are things where I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's their talking point. Let me look up that stat. And maybe there's some truth to it. Maybe there's not, right? But it's good to know, at least on their terrain, what they're cherry picking, right? And what it means, and gets you out of your own dogma where just repeating the same talking points to your friends is very easy, right? So it's good. So yeah, I got that out of it. And
which reminds me, by the way, I do want to really quickly cash a check I wrote earlier, because I said you got to have some kind of response to the point about how you can have socialism within capitalism, you can have capitalism within socialism. And I think the response is just to say that it assumes the thing that's an issue in these arguments, because it assumes that the just way of allocating resources is that they go to whoever has the money to buy them. And it's like, yeah, sure. So if you have the money to buy up some resources, then you can have a little bit of the economy to reorganize in a socialist way. You could say that's very tolerant, but that's like saying, oh, if you have like somebody, if you just convince a prince and like when he inherits the throne, like he can then implement your system, right? Like, so it's very tolerant, whatever you can convince a prince of is what's going to happen. It's like, well, no, because we don't agree that like hereditary rule is the right way to decide political outcomes. And so that's not going to be satisfying to anybody who's an anti-monarchist. And so similarly, anybody who's an anti-capitalist, it shouldn't be satisfying to say, well, if you can afford to like fund your own little commune, you can organize that in a socialist way, because our whole thing is that we think that what the societal structures are should be decided democratically, not by money.
Right. For sure. I think, to wrap up, first of all, thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun. I think just looking forward to your debate, was there anything in particular that you got from watching this and your prep?
Yeah, I gotta look up LASIK eye surgery and the Hispanic unemployment.
Yeah, you don't let him get you on that, because then that's a mic drop moment.
Fair enough. All right, thanks, Jake.
Thank you.